started when I was 17 years old, probably. I learned the concept of team collaboration, where a group of people working together could do extraordinary things. I was in a high school and playing for legendary Lindy Laro, and I learned at age 17 that people who work in a group effort can do extraordinary things. We had an undersized, undefeated state high school championship football team that nobody believed would be undefeated. Fast forward that, former prosecuting attorney, now defense attorney, and we started seeing again the value of collaboration and team play. By working with doctors in substance abuse, it started to make sense to me. Again, another expression of what I just said. Most people think that if you have a legal problem and a health problem at the same time, you're in the midst of a perfect storm. We turned that on its head. We basically said it's a perfect opportunity. If you work on both problems at the same time in the same instance, the negative power of both can drive a solution for each. But only if we first create a no-nonsense treatment program that really does work, and then get a chance to show somebody that it works. I've been to 30 counties in Pennsylvania. Imagine standing in a courtroom a long way from home, looking at an overworked, street-smart, no-nonsense, tell me something that I can believe criminal trial judge in the face of a prosecutor who got elected probably on promising everybody he's tough on crime, and that mantra in your face, that's real accountability. We had to take that program and prove that it worked in the face of all that pushback. And now for 15 years, in the face of relentless, constant advocacy from the district attorney's office, with a judge ruling whether or not we've carried the day or not, in the face of all that pushback, something wonderful happened. On the anvil of litigation, the fire and the pushback and the pounding kept our program getting better, and better through the countless contributions, priceless contributions of gifted professionals like Neil Capretta, Dr. Harry Hawes, Dr. Jim Barber, Dr. John Wrightson. All of those contributions, and putting them together in that team concept where we started this little journey here, has paid off. That anvil of litigation forged something that is, 1, totally abstinent-oriented, 2, verifiable, 3, legally binding, long-term extended care. VRN medical legal teams now who cut their teeth in a whole world of accountability, unlike anybody else or any other organization you'll find, are now not only opening local health legal centers for relief, but passionately committed to teach and spread this modality as fast and far as we can. This has its challenges. We're used to challenges. We rise to the occasion when we're challenged. The biggest challenge we're going to have now is a lack of funding. We're moving so fast and we are so far out in front in the medical technologies Dr. Barber described that the average person and the policymaker doesn't get it yet. It's important for you to come and take advantage of our information, become knowledgeable, and then knowingly, intelligently challenge your doctor, challenge your legislator, challenge anybody out there to become informed and join a real war on drug and alcohol. The hallmark of the 3-step VRN process is step 1, the bridge application and detox. Step 2, the Vivitrol blockade application. And step 3, VRN putting it all together in a legally binding, individually prescribed, long-term extended healthcare plan leading always to total abstinence. Step 1 is so critically important because without step 1, we can't get the Vivitrol blockade. And the bridge detox allows a person to quit being dope sick, get their wits about them, and for 4 or 5 days stabilize so that they can make some real decisions toward total recovery. Step 2, the Vivitrol blockade, is what it sounds like. It blocks the persons from getting high on opiates or alcohol for a 30-day period. And during that blockade, that's when you are positioned now for us to reach inside your core and teach you things about yourself you may have forgotten, and talk to you to get you involved now that you are disassociated from the compulsion of those withdrawal symptoms long enough to join the fight with us, because any fight on substance or alcohol abuse is not a winning fight unless we empower the addict and alcoholic to be part of it. Step 3 is my favorite part. It's where VRN takes step 1 and step 2 and turns them into a team, resulting in long-term extended care, beginning with assessment, taking you through the detox, the blockade, and now an extended care plan that is independent of any other medicinal interventions. In an open court of law, Verifiable Recovery Network has demonstrated that it is a dependable first step toward real recovery, total abstinence.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome, and thank you for coming to this event this morning. My name is Doug McEltrout. I am part of the SACS not-for-profit organization, Substance Abuse Coalition Summits. I'm the Communications and Event Director, and I would like to introduce to you Attorney Angelo, who is here representing the CAPE Institute. For all of you, and out of respect for time and consideration today, Angelo promised to keep things right to the program so you could get what you need for the CLE classes. This is an educational outreach portion of SACS. So what he is doing here for you this morning gives you your continuing legal education credits. I do that for mortgage banking. Yeah, I'm a mortgage banker also, so I do the same thing. It's really great to have all of you here. Thank you for being here, and I'm going to let Angelo take over the program for you right now and begin the instruction. Angelo Papa, Attorney Angelo Papa, it's all yours. Thank you.
Thanks, Doug.
You're welcome.
Take care. Okay, can everybody hear me okay? And if you can't, let me know. And Doug, most importantly, Dante, you let me know. If we have any battery issues or anything like that, you just go time out. And if I stop talking, he's going to kind of like make sure that this thing is properly recorded, okay? If you take out your book is entitled Continuing Legal Education, and I grabbed the wrong one. Do you have the substance abuse one? Because I grabbed the practice management one. Make sure your book says Substance Abuse Community Leadership, ELM, okay? Great. Is there an ELM book laying on somebody's desk there that's not being used? Because I forgot to get myself one. Okay, great. Okay, this is CLE, and there's a whole lot in that three-letter word on the cover, ELM, okay? This is all about community leadership, and this is all about stuff that's not necessarily in a statute, although we'll have plenty of that. It's more about who you are as a member of the community, who we are as a profession as a member of the community. It seems to me that there's no serious challenge that the pillars of a community, the leaders of the community, are in education, law, and medicine, okay? And that's where the ELM comes from. A little bit of a side note there. The elm tree has always been known as the freedom tree. Now, most of you know that there's all kind of literature out there, if you want to Google it, on elm trees. They're sweeping, flowing lines. They've been the subject of many artists. But up in New England, years ago, obviously, before we were a country, the Patriots apparently used to meet under an elm tree in Boston or that area. And they did all of their collaborating. That's going to be another word we're going to use a lot today. And they, of course, were meeting to overthrow, or whatever it was, the English rule here in America. And as the story goes, the English cut the tree down. Okay, and as a result of that, they planted lots of elm trees. And most elm trees are all over the downtown of almost every town in America. And from what I understand, even internationally, it probably came from Lafayette, but internationally, the elm tree has always been a symbol of freedom. So they call them freedom trees. So that's what we call elm. Okay, so that's only an image right there. But what we're talking about is educators, lawyers, and medical professionals collaborating and working together on a community problem. And make no mistake about it, it is a community problem. And we are leaders, whether we like it or not. Sometimes leadership comes with responsibility and duty. Every one of us have had the experience of walking into a family picnic and hearing somebody say, "That's the lawyer." Okay? You know, so we go to court many times, and I'm really got a pet peeve on this. I'm going to try to keep my personal stuff out of this, but one of the things that really irks me is how we're treated sometimes with disrespect in a courtroom. We could be disrespected by a judge. We could be disrespected by their staff. Some of you have images popping in your head right now. You could be disrespected by the other attorney. We have a practice management class right now that's going to happen this afternoon. You could be disrespected by your client, okay? And so that's like a little vignette for us this afternoon in our afternoon class after lunch. And don't let anybody disrespect who you are personally and certainly who you are professionally. A little bit of background, I used to be a phys ed teacher, okay, and a football coach. My guidance counselor talked to my mom and dad, and I'll never forget, I was a senior in high school, and my guidance counselor said something to the effect of, "The papers are all smart, but I don't think he's one of them. Don't waste your money sending him to college." Okay, and by the way, he was not lying. Basically, based upon the records and whatnot, all I cared about was playing football at that time. And by the way, we beat Mount Lebanon in Pitt Stadium when they still had dirt. So if you people are from Mount Lebanon, we're in Bethel Park, can't take that one back, okay? Anyway, and I'm still proud of that one. We had 720 kids in my graduating class, and you know what? It's a theme that still exists with me today. It was not about our talent, it was about our wanting to. And so I come from that background. Maybe it's a little bit corny to some of you. I imagine several of you in here are much smarter than I am, probably did much better on the LSAT test or the bar exam or whatever. But here we are, okay? And so from that, I am saying that I come from a background where I really appreciate being a lawyer. I became a lawyer at age 36. I went to night school at Duquesne University, and I had to work for it. I had to work hard for it. And maybe because I had to work for it, maybe because I wasn't as bright as the next guy, maybe because maybe I appreciate it more. But one of my reasons I like to every single one of, some of you have been in my CLEs before, and you always know that I always try to sow that seed in there of how much I respect what we do and how much I hope you respect what you do. And don't let anybody disturb that. Now, we certainly don't look down our nose at anybody, but we don't look up at anybody either. So we're a major member of the community. And so my goal here today is allow you to try to inspire you to passionately be involved in a big community problem. We have big community problems relating to substance abuse. And you could say that, you know what, I'm a mortgage attorney, I'm a bankruptcy attorney, I'm a this, I'm a that. Well, you have to get your CLEs. And maybe sometimes you have to walk into a room and somebody forces you to eat peas, and you find out that I kind of like peas, okay? So hopefully when you leave here, we're going to work hard today. I'm going to work hard. And I'm going to try to give you something of value as a citizen, not just as an attorney, okay? So ELM is something that Douglas there and I, and my paralegal Bruce Galick, we've been working on this for over 15 years. Some of you have heard my substance abuse things clear back 15 years ago. And I saw it coming, and I just said, you know what, I'm a solution-oriented guy, and this is not good. My first foray into substance abuse was having a young man in my office sitting at my conference table, and we'll tell you all about that in this afternoon's class about practice management. And I gave him a list of tasks that we were going to perform because he's in trouble. He's going to go to jail without me. Okay, he was accused of possession with intent to deliver a controlled substance. If he is successfully convicted, he's going to go to jail. And maybe for the first time ever, somebody got his attention. Well, I quote him of a fee of about $3,500 or whatever, and I did a good job for him. I made a car payment on that and a few other things in the office. We paid the bill that month. And before I could get him downtown into processing that, and we'll go into the matriculation of criminal justice when we get into the heart of the book here, he got arrested 2 more times. Not once, 2 more times. So I started thinking to myself, wow. And I started thinking, and there's a couple words here and phrases that I want us to always remember. And by the way, do we have anybody out here who's going to nod off every once in a while and Google? If you do, you can be my Google guy. I would love to have a Google member of this class that's like the Google guy, the go-to Google guy, or girl, or a woman. Okay, made that mistake in court, by the way. He called me a girl, Your Honor. I didn't mean it. You know, and believe me, I had that problem. It's a real case. Anyway, we're not going to go there. So, Google woman, lady, man, in between. It's a weird country anymore. Whatever you want, I need a Google person. Okay? And so I would like to have somebody Google and be ready to go on the phrase mens rea. Okay? And even though, guys, if you're not a long way from criminal law and you're just here to get your credits to make sure that you're still licensed and all that, you still remember that from law school. I think they make everybody take at least one criminal law course. Mens rea, okay? My second one is the word collaboration. The third one is pandering, okay? Pandering is going to be a huge theme in what we're doing here, okay? Moving on now into the class. And again, the cover, your community needs your leadership. You are respected as an attorney. And I just saw one of my most gifted colleagues come in, and he's such a powerful force in human interest and law, and he's just a born leader. Each of you, your communities, your kids, doctors, educators, they need your leadership. Hopefully, you won't sit on the sideline when you leave here, even if you're not practicing in this area. Okay, now when we go into the inside cover, and my printer printed both sides of the page, I usually, when I get these things printed, I usually only make them print one side so you can scribble on one side. But he was telling me how much it costs, so I said print both sides. That was easy. Print both sides. It was half the thickness. Now, each one of you, if you give your email address and ask Ben Wolf at Cape Institute, after you tell him how good I was, okay? If you can't say anything good, don't say anything at all. Remember that? Your mother said that. When you fill out your evaluation of the course, you might want to remember that. Anyway, so at the end of the course here, we are going to have you fill this out, and remember that they will email you the book. That'll keep you from having to lug it home. And if you're getting an email, you literally would do me a favor if you leave it on the table and not take it with you, because then I can use it again and hand it out, because we hand them out in schools and whatnot, and you'll get that as we go. Okay? All right, great. Some of you people, I saw you come in just right now. Nobody's keeping a stopwatch on you. We'll make sure you get your credits and everything. The administrative stuff, we'll take care of it as we go. Okay? All right. Now, inside cover. Finally possible to prevent drug and alcohol relapse. Now, you say that, and I say it, and I've been saying it for 15 years, and I can tell you right now, by the way, if we need extra chairs, Doug, Bob will wheel them in here anytime you want. So all you have to do is drag any furniture in here, because it looks like, by the way, anybody comes in late, we have empty chairs. And Doug, if you need one too. Okay, it's finally possible to prevent drug and alcohol relapse. Now think about that statement. How many people in here, before you just heard me say that, think that it's impossible to prevent this problem? How many people honestly now, raise your hand, I'm going to ask you, nobody's going to take you to the town square and stone you. How many people honestly believe that it's basically impossible to prevent drug and alcohol relapse? How many people think that? Raise your hand. Be proud. Good. Nobody's raising their hand. Already, we accomplished something. Okay, because it is. And the question is, where do I fit in? Okay? And that goes back to my community leadership. My son, my daughter, my grandson, God forbid, knock on wood, I've been lucky so far. And the second call to action is get tested today. We have a test now that'll give us a great deal of objective and subjective information to see if somebody would respond to what's going on, okay? Now, I am not getting a commission from this whatsoever, okay? And if you look at it down here, it's all kind of frayed at the bottom. I'm not proud of how slow I read, okay? Again, it goes back to those elementary years when the guidance counselor told, don't waste your money on him. I read slowly. It was a real problem when I was in law school because I used to drive from Newcastle. I was an assistant principal in a high school, and I used to drive, as soon as that last bus left, I'd be sprinting to my car and heading down to Pittsburgh. And guys, if anybody of you could do me a favor and get me a glass of water and just tiptoe up here, because I'm already drying out. Thanks, Doug. Anyway, the water's in the back, Doug. Anyway, so I used to drive to Pittsburgh, and they didn't have 279 back then. That was like about 30 years ago. So I had to hustle to get to Duquesne and get through trafficking up on the bluff there. I got so many parking tickets, they actually put 2 of those orange things on my car once. So it was called the Denver Boot. Do they still call them Denver Boot? They put 2 of them on my car. And I got home very late that night. Thank you so very much. Thank you. So going down there to Duquesne University, I had to study at night. And this was my regimen on how I studied, okay? And again, it goes back to this want-to theme. I always read my cases. Never went to class without reading my cases because I thought I'd flunk out any day. The first day I thought I was done. So I always wrote a handwritten brief. Every class did it. Then I would hear the professor go through it, and he'd find out that it's totally something different that I thought it was important for. So then I took his notes, and then everybody's whispering outside, hey, did you get a Gilbert's? Remember Gilbert's? Do they still do those, Gilbert's? No, I got an Emmanuel. Remember Emmanuel? Well, I couldn't make up my mind, so I got them both. And so I used to go home, and I used to take my handwritten brief, I used to add it to the Gilbert's manual, and add it to the Emmanuel manual, and make my own thing. That's what I did for 4 years while I was an assistant principal in a high school. And I read very slowly. Back to the point. I was at the shore recently, take my family there once a year, and I started reading a book that was given to me. I am making no commission. Ben Wolf is making no commission. We are not selling anything. We're not selling anything here. This is a CLE class. I highly recommend this book, Dreamland. Number one, it's interesting because the author has found a way to keep going back and forth between human stories and connecting them such that you'll have an amazing background on substance abuse and how it's some of its major origins in this country. I am not saying he's right. I'm not saying he's wrong. I'm saying he sounds like he knows what he's talking about, and it'll help you. It's called Dreamland. So I was so impressed with that book that we actually added it into our class, and actually I had my secretary, every book, this goes from law school by the way, every book I ever read I scribble all over in it. Historical reference, Theodore Roosevelt. You know how Theodore Roosevelt used to read magazines? President, remember Theodore Roosevelt? Cousin of Franklin? When he read a magazine, when he was done with the page, he would tear the page out and throw it on the floor. He ripped the page out after he read a magazine, every single time he read a magazine. Anyway, so my wife always makes fun of me because I deface my books, and my law school books, you should see those. I literally wore out 4 or 5 highlighters because that first couple cases I highlighted the entire thing. There was nothing to unhighlight. It was amazing because it all sounded important to me until somebody talked to me about the holding and all that stuff, and we know where we're going. Okay, so in Dreamland, I'm going to spend some time with some of Sam Quinone's story. And it goes back to those words, mens rea, collaboration, and mostly pandering. Okay? Now, you're going to have to bear with me because I basically put the important stuff that I saw in there and and basically buzzworded it. And it starts with he apparently lived for a while in Mexico. This is not a class about profiling, okay? This has nothing to do with things like that, okay? I'm sensitive to that. We come from a town in Newcastle where we had, Newcastle was a very big town once upon a time, and it was a very well-known big town. It was supposed to be as big as Pittsburgh someday, or certainly bigger than Youngstown. Of course, Youngstown's not very big anymore either. All those steel industry issues and all that. But I can remember there were deeds. To this day, I'm an attorney. Every once in a while, we see a deed where somebody has a house on the North Hill in Newcastle, and it's not permitted to be sold to an Italian or a Catholic, or worse, both. Okay? So, listen, this is not about that. However, he spent time in Mexico. And it's fascinating to me that he spent time in one of these, the Mexican culture there, and they were called like ranchers. And basically they were very, very, very religious. They were very respectful of their family. They were very poor. To this day, they're very, very poor. We're talking about cardboard for the walls of your house, corrugated metal, dirt floors. Any of you go to Cancun? It's kind of, to me, really telling when you leave all that craziness with people putting balloons on your head and dancing out in restaurants and whatnot, and you go right outside of town and you see people living in corrugated, you see that in the Caribbean too. So those people, just like anybody else, are going to try and figure out how to make money, and they have found a way to make a lot of money in black tar heroin. Black tar heroin is not very refined. It's pulling a substance out of the poppy, which grows very well in the hillsides in Mexico. And so clearly there are entrepreneurs, all maybe misdirected, but they find a lot of money to be made in black tar heroin. The story goes on with several chapters to talk about how they created something that's not like a cartel. These people are basically young kids, young 20-year-olds. Everybody's a kid to me nowadays. And they basically don't sell a lot. They don't shoot. They rarely have violent outbursts because they know that attracts attention to the police. And one of these typical methods is to fill up little balloons with black tar heroin, maybe $60 worth, and put them in your mouth. And if you get pulled over or stopped or whatever, they swallow them. And of course, they can still use them later. And I'm not going to go into graphic details. You can figure that part out. And they're almost never sent to jail for very long. And they almost never have enough for a felony. And they never shoot. And so they have actually created something that's mostly under the radar screen. And these things have been happening over years in a lot of people coming across the border. I'm not a political statement on walls and no walls either. That's not what we're doing today. All we're saying is there are people out there who recognize that you can make money from this, and they have. And it's an amazing, the book goes on and on and on with specific details and interviews with people who have made a lot of money. Now, a lot of money to them is a brand new pickup truck, and they usually almost always send their money home to their mother and their family. They're very committed that way. They rarely, almost never, use themselves. So this is kind of like a common theme of Dreamland. Dreamland starts off by talking about what America used to be, and the picnics in the park and the Ferris wheels and all that stuff that we can remember. Some of our kids will probably never see any of that. But it starts to show you a parallel. And it also starts to show you, in that parallel, it shows you that some of the most attractive places are places that used to be economically significant. There's several stories about, like Detroit, Pittsburgh. Of course, Pittsburgh has significantly recovered. Steubenville, West Virginia, towns that had huge industries that moved out. There's still money there, okay? But there's a depressed attitude. And that starts to work in the psyche of people. There are usually a lot of workers' compensation claims, a lot of lawsuits, a lot of personal injury suits. I'm not bashing personal injury. I'm merely telling you that this seems to be a common theme, and it's traced very effectively by this gentleman. And it starts to unfold as a marketplace for this very small amount of trafficking that's very proliferate and way under the radar screen. Now, what's really neat about it is on page 4 of your book here, it talks about Boston, Massachusetts, and talking about, pain and things like that, and a letter from a graduate student that kind of, to this very day, this is a huge problem. If you look on page 4 and page 5, there's a letter that goes clear back to 1979 that was probably never intended to be what it has become. It has 1 or 2 conclusions in it. It bore the title, Addiction Rare in Patients Treated with Narcotics. Addiction Rare in Patients Treated with Narcotics. That's in bold, and it's the letter we were talking about from Boston, Massachusetts. That's important because to this day, that's the concept. There are almost no studies that actually document something that we all know, that addiction is a byproduct almost all the time for using narcotics, okay, in the medical profession. Then from there it goes on to Huntington, West Virginia, and it talks a little bit about black heroin on the other side of the Mississippi. He was shocked to start. He knew in San Diego, Los Angeles, places like that, the black tar heroin was right there. People would just walk across the border. But he started finding it now on the other side of the Mississippi. These entrepreneurs, these people who are driven by poverty, quite frankly, are out there following and pushing and finding other marketplaces, okay? And I'm not going to go into much detail on that. And we're going to skip now, and I'm going to go to page 8. In 1979, the same year as that letter in Boston, he wrote the same letter to the New England Journal, and that basically is, to this day, still an attitude. Now, it's really neat, that chapter on Billy Riddle. Billy Riddle was a doctor who was your old hometown doctor who treated everything from broken legs to somebody having a heart attack. He's just your general practitioner back when medicine was a little more simple. It talks about him hiring a young guy. The young guy was flamboyant, drove a Porsche. He was a guy who ran in between his rounds and whatnot, had people lined up in his office. And it turns out that he's really prescribing a lot of pain meds to a lot of people. And again, what's he got? He's armed with that amazing finding that there's no correlation between addiction and narcotics, that people can be treated for pain with narcotics. I'm not going to go further than that. There is a couple of highlights I'm going to talk about. And we will go now to page 10. And they call this guy the ad man, 1951. This is so amazing to me. I didn't know any of this stuff, and I've been messing around with this for 15 years. The ad man, Arthur Sackler is his name. Arthur Sackler comes from the World War II era. Very proud, very distinguished psychiatrist. He quit being a psychiatrist to write ads for pharmaceuticals and for the medical industry. Arthur Sackler is a person who was hired when he quit being a psychiatrist to write ads for a Charles Pfizer. See, these names start to surface here. Pfizer Corporation. And before long, one of his clients, Charles Pfizer and Company, then the world's largest manufacturer of vitamin C, the company's newly formed pharmaceutical research department had developed a synthetic antibiotic, first derived from soil bacteria, terramycin, and the company was moving from chemical manufacturing to pharmaceuticals. Instead of licensing it to a drug company, Pfizer wanted to sell the antibiotic himself. There's a major step here happening in medicine where Pfizer is now deciding to market. We could have a class here, and we're going to have one today, on advertising. Remember some of you guys that are older in this business like me, you know that, can you remember, anybody here can remember when it was illegal for an attorney to advertise? Does anybody remember that time? Okay, good. So it was, okay? And this debate raged on, and it's the same debate. It goes back to that word pandering. When we start telling our clients what they want to hear, not just what they need to hear. When doctors and pharmaceuticals start telling their patients what they want to hear, not necessarily what they need to hear. So that worked out really well for the Pfizer company. And if you trace this even later, I'm not going to go too much more, but I have all of the quotes from the various chapters, and the bolded and underlined is really the important part of our story here. That Pfizer thing will develop and evolve into one of the first big problems in the marketplace was Valium. Anybody hear of Valium? Valium became very popular. Everybody that went to a doctor, especially females, this isn't sexist, but this is history, especially females were, I'm stressed about this, I'm stressed about that, I'm stressed about this, take a Valium. Everybody took a Valium. It was very, very popular to take a Valium. And it was very inhumane not to give a Valium, because stress is something that's an important session. See how we're starting to pander now, and we get into another of the ad-man's programs through Pfizer, and we go right into the Valium thing. And then we're going to skip and go clear to the world health situation. And a lot of this background is more detailed, but I'm not going to spend too much time here because I want to get into the meat of our course. But we start to evolve then into narcotics being used legally, okay? Narcotics being used for people who were dying. The World Health Organization, WHO, okay, the World Health Organization started pushing the idea that it's inhumane to have somebody who's dying be in pain. And there's a great deal of logic to that, because if they're dying, maybe an addiction would be not a principal concern at that time. So the addiction, pain. Okay, what's going on here is pain, narcotics, pain, narcotics, pain, narcotics. In America, clear into the 80s, it was still very taboo for doctors to prescribe narcotics. There was a huge push on to develop non-narcotic painkillers, Novocaine, for example, in dentistry. So, but they planted the seed basically in England. It started to go through the World Health Situation, and the World Health Situation, remember now, all we have is this little known letter that was never intended, where I started this discussion, never intended to say that narcotics are not linked to addiction. The study wasn't about that. It wasn't a study at all. But they keep bootstrapping that and saying, by the way, there's a lot of people in chronic pain, and it's inhumane to deprive them of a narcotic that will take the pain away. And now that slippery slope starts to work. And do you know, as we speak today, the Veterans Administration and World Health Organization call pain a vital sign? Pain is now a vital sign. And we get into the patient rights thing. Some of you can remember this in hospitals. This isn't that long ago. Patients' rights started to become, you have a right not to be in pain. It's a vital sign. And somebody has a narcotic and you should get it, okay? And this pandering, this competition for patients in hospitals. Anybody been in a hospital where visiting a friend and the nurse comes in and says, "Hi, Gary, how's your pain today on 1 to 10? Anybody ever hear that? That's something new. You know, there's no objective evidence on pain, but they basically allow the patient to pick 10. I'm going to pick 10 because I might not see that nurse for 2 hours, and this is wearing off. I just had surgery. I might be enrolled. I'm going to say 10, okay? And basically, they don't ask you why it's 10 or how long it's 10. If it's 10, here you go. And basically, what happened was all of that got into what we would call an illegal addiction. Any of you my age would remember health classes with books called Monkey on the Back, and it always showed some savory drug dealer hooking you and getting, and all of those attitudes and stuff disappeared with the evolution that we're tracing through this book. And that goes back to where it's a community problem now. This is a huge problem, the legal addiction. And these marketplaces are traced, okay? Not just from Mexico, from anywhere else. These marketplaces are traced and are very viable, and they exist almost everywhere now. They're kind of like everywhere. And it all stems from the pain meds. A lot of that stems from that. And this struggle over the years between morphine and whatever is legal and not. I wanted to, before I get to the end here, on this book here, I wanted to go over a couple of the highlighted sections, and you're going to have to bear with me a little bit. They might be out of context. I want to make sure I got these across. On page 26, in 1996, the president of the American Pain Society, Dr. James Campbell, said in a speech that if pain were assessed with the same zeal as other vital signs are, it would have a better chance of being treated properly. We need to train doctors and nurses to treat pain as a vital sign. That's when it really blew the doors off, when we started calling pain a vital sign. It's the fifth vital sign. In 1998, the Veterans Health Administration made pain a fifth vital sign. Now, what do we know about pain? Okay, this is where I'm going to venture back off of into being a person, not so much as a lawyer. Being a person with a big mouth. What do you know about pain? Let's think about pain a little bit. Pain is what? Does anybody doubt that pain is subjective, right? Pain is very, very subjective. The euphoria that comes from ingesting a narcotic is taking it way over the limit on whether or not I'm in pain from what I was in pain from, or in pain because it's been 24 hours since I've had a narcotic. This is the status of American medicine today. Pain is a vital sign, with no more to go on than all the subjective and objective evidence we've been talking about. And that's kind of, now I'm going to go to page 28. Time was the key, okay? Chronic pain patients took more time than most to diagnose. Now you can, they have found that you can maybe more effectively determine if somebody's really in pain or not, but it takes time with your patients. And it appears now, including managed health care, that those things are really not working. There's a quote here on page 29 from a doctor. "I get raises and keep my job based on whether I am keeping my patients happy," said a nursing supervisor I spoke with. When the Joint Commission surveyed us, they looked through charts looking at pain. There were looking at other things too, but pain was the... So we're talking about making sure that we please the patients. Among the new people in the movement was a company called Purdue Frederick. Remember Mr. Schleck, the ad man? That was a company he bought for almost nothing. Purdue Frederick became Purdue Pharma. Purdue Pharma produced OxyContin. It produced all of the major pain medication that we're having problems with. Purdue Pharma, the person, by the way, the ad man did die. By the way, the background on Purdue Pharma is on the bottom of page 29. The ad man did eventually die like 40 years ago. He has no clue what Purdue Pharma has become. He has no clue what Purdue Pharma has somehow maybe been permitted to create. I'm not blaming Purdue Pharma, I'm merely blaming this concept of pandering. So all of that we inherit in our community right now. And again, we're lawyers, educators, lawyers, doctors. Elm, we are the leaders of the community. If we don't step up and lead, other people will step up and lead. Douglas back there is also a professional entertainer, very professional, gifted professional in mortgage banking, but he's an entertainer, very talented. And he has a little slogan. We call it the detoxing of America. America was toxed over 40 years. And maybe it's because we sat back and let it happen. And we let it happen because we let the most popular music be that connected with the drug culture. We let the most popular sayings, we let the most popular commissions, things like that, sit while we sat and watched it all. And literally, if we keep on watching, we're going to keep on having the same result. And that's why my plea to you is be a leader in your community and first and foremost, become competent. We know there's basically 4 levels of incompetence. There are people who don't know what they don't know. I know that somebody walked in this door already who knows more than they used to. You didn't even know you didn't know this. The second thing is you know that there's something you don't know, but you still don't know it, okay? And the third one is I know there's something I don't know, and I know it if I look in the book, but I still don't know it instinctively. And I think that we're called to lead, and the call to lead is to call to know something that's valuable and help people. Now, you could be an attorney who's specializing in criminal law, and you could have a picture in the yellow pages with handcuffs and somebody sawing them off or something like that. And that, to me, would be pandering. I think if you're an attorney, though, and you're in criminal law, or if you're an attorney and you're not in criminal law, and you know somebody who needs help, and you get them help, I think that that's your first major step. So we are now getting to the point in time where we want to talk a little bit about the actual application of substance abuse and how we could help in a real big way. By the way, I do want to make sure I'm not moving too fast here. Page 24, that amazing turnaround. We used to be a country where we didn't want to hear anything about narcotics. We were one of the last in the world. All of the narcotics movement legally took place in other countries. All took place in other countries. We, the most free society on earth, were very much the last one. But we call that the revolution. So if you really want to know a mouthful and you read page 24 through 25, more importantly, read this book. You won't be able to put it down. I guarantee you won't be able to put this down if you get this book, Dreamland. But anyway, 24 and 25 talks about the revolution. And somewhere in the book, too, it talked about opium, narcotics, morphine, the morphine molecule. The morphine molecule, it's been compared to a bad lover. Pouts when it doesn't get attention. It pouts more violently every day when it doesn't get attention. Drugs are shed by our body. Vitamins, vitamin freak, you take 50,000 vitamins a day. You already know that you can probably excrete most of those before they'll have any benefit. Every drug in the history of pharmaceuticals, almost every drug is eliminated by the body except morphine. The morphine molecule is something that defies all description, coming clear from Egypt, traced back through World War I with all the pain and suffering, the Civil War, World War II. The morphine molecule is something that nobody understands yet, and it's the essential in all of these narcotics. So get the book, become informed, or even entertained, and know a little bit about Valium, a little bit about Pfizer, a little bit about Purdue Pharma, a little bit about advertising, a little about pandering, And then start searching your own mind and heart and ask yourself, do I pander my clients? Do I pander my kids? Do I pander my wife, my husband? And that's just tough love, the way we call it. They call it a million different things. It's tough love. It's whatever you want to call it, but it's something that we as humans shouldn't do. And silently pandering is probably just as guilty. I always tell people after one of my classes that when you leave, you're never going to be able to have plausible deniability. That's a political term, right? Plausible deniability. I didn't know. I talked to a legislator the other day and I was explaining to him, "Hi, Angelo, I didn't know that." Yeah, guess what? You're never going to say I didn't know it again. And when I don't see you step up to the plate and do something and start working on a substance abuse plan that's really going to help, then I'm going to say that you didn't know. You know now. So maybe it's not a good thing to meet with me. Maybe we're going to take some excuses away. So the key ally is we're now on page 30 of our book, okay? Now, to give us a little bit of breathing room here, I'm going to allow something that's graphic to take and do a better job entertaining you and informing you than me. And I hope it works. I just see my screen timed out. Now, gee, I didn't expect that to happen. This is very informative, very informative. We're not going to see the whole thing. And let's go ahead and hopefully this will work.
The brain is a complex organ at the center of our nervous system. Multiple regions of the brain are involved in the regulation of emotions, including reward and pleasure. One such region that regulates the reward pathway is the ventral tegmental area, or VTA. The VTA can be stimulated by activities including eating, exercise, and sex. Stimulation of the VTA can induce the release of dopamine into the nucleus accumbens. Dopamine promotes the feeling of pleasure and euphoria. One of the major neurotransmitter systems involved in modulating the dopamine reward pathway is the endogenous opioid system. The ventral tegmental area, or VTA, is an important part of this pathway. Within the VTA, mu-opioid receptors found on the surface of neurons are stimulated by endogenous opioids. One example of an endogenous opioid is beta-endorphin, a member of the endorphin family. Stimulation of these mu-opioid receptors by endorphins induces a signal which travels along the axon, ultimately resulting in the activation of dopaminergic neurons. Here, at the dopaminergic neuron, the signal stimulates the fusion of dopamine-containing vesicles with the presynaptic membrane. The vesicle fusion releases dopamine into the synapse. Once released, the dopamine molecules traverse the synaptic cleft. When they reach the postsynaptic neuron, they bind to and activate dopamine receptors found there. In doing so, they activate a series of neurological processes that create feelings of pleasure and euphoria. Like endogenous endorphins, opioid drugs such as heroin and opioid analgesics bind to the mu-opioid receptors in the ventral tegmental area. This binding stimulates the dopamine reward system in the same manner as endogenous opioids. Through this mechanism, opioid use produces reward, pleasure, and further drug wanting. Repeated exposure to escalating doses of a full opioid agonist produces tolerance. That is, higher and higher doses of the full agonist are required to achieve the same effect, or constant doses produce less and less of an effect. As tolerance develops, higher quantities of opioids are required to stimulate the release of dopamine in an attempt to achieve the pleasure experienced during initial opioid use. Tolerance and physical dependence makes the addicted user susceptible to withdrawal symptoms. At this point, the drug user no longer experiences euphoria with drug use, only the relief that comes from warding off the inevitable withdrawal.
Okay, remember we talked about mens rea, right? You're a criminal attorney. You're in front of a judge who's looking at your client like he's a scumbag loser and he's violated the law. And he's got a room as big as this with people to be sentenced. Okay? Been there. I've done that. I've got yelled at. I started to make speeches like this, and I had a judge once in Meadville say, "Why do I need to hear any of this?" And he's going like that the whole time. I got a prosecutor in my face saying that I got elected to be tough on crime. These people all need to go to jail, and I'm going to clean up our streets. Okay? That's the concept. Now, this is where we get into the mens rea, right? The guilty heart and whatnot. Does that sound like there might be a significant number of people who are doing the repeat, the recidivism, because they are now being punished by that molecule, that morphine molecule, that rotten lover who's not getting attention, and it's 24 hours, and I want attention, okay? That's really, this is where, if I'm an attorney, if I'm a mother, if I'm a father or an uncle, I need to know this, and I need to be able to talk to my son, daughter, client. That's part of what we're supposed to be doing. So now we're going to go into the withdrawal, okay?
Partial opioid agonists are substances that also bind to mu-opioid receptors. Partial agonists differ from full agonists in that they both activate and block the mu receptor. Partial agonists stimulate the mu-opioid receptor and produce a less powerful effect than a full agonist. Because partial agonists still activate mu-opioid receptors and promote the release of dopamine, they can lead to dependence and subsequent withdrawal if discontinued. Physiological dependence on any opioid results in the need to continue full or partial opioid agonists to avoid withdrawal symptoms. Because continued opioid use changes the brain's natural endorphin balance and responsivity, the normal endorphin system is injured, producing many of the symptoms of dependence. Many of these brain changes occur in the limbic system. Next, we will turn our attention to the phenomenon of opioid withdrawal, which is a direct consequence of those changes. The locus coeruleus is a region of the brain involved in arousal and alarm. Many neurons in the locus coeruleus region of the brain produce the neurotransmitter norepinephrine. Norepinephrine regulates a variety of central nervous system functions, including the regulation of respiration, blood pressure, and general alertness. Imbalances in this neurotransmitter system are partially responsible for the symptoms of withdrawal. Opioid use stimulates mu-opioid receptors, which in turn inhibit the release of norepinephrine in the locus coeruleus. To offset this inhibition, neurons within the locus coeruleus increase their activity, releasing additional norepinephrine. During withdrawal, when no opioids are present, locus coeruleus neurons release excessive amounts of norepinephrine due to their elevated activity and the loss of inhibition by mu-opioid receptors. An excessive amount of norepinephrine in specific brain locations produces the symptoms of withdrawal, including anxiety, fever, diarrhea, nausea, vomiting, and insomnia. Vivitrol is indicated for the prevention of relapse to opioid dependence following opioid detoxification. Vivitrol is an opioid antagonist.
Approach our break, and we're going there in a couple minutes here. This is a nice time for you to, now obviously, who's remembering norepinephrine, coeruleus, etc.? Okay, you need to know it at that level. But what you really need to know is there is something physiological taking place that is very, very powerful, very much beyond the control of any human being that I know of. So that's kind of like where we're at now with a person who has a narcotic addiction from black tar, heroin, from the operation I just had, you know, all over the boards. That's kind of like what we're dealing with. But we're attorneys, we're parents, we're community leaders. We have a lot of good news for you after the break. A lot of very powerful good news for you. We're now on page 30 of your book, called The Key Ally. And when I say the key ally, I'm a history fanatic. I mean, I like history. I love history. I read as much history as I can. The key ally, let's talk about substance abuse. Substance abuse has been with us. References exist in the book of Proverbs in the Bible. Those of you who have read any of Paul's teaching, there's many references there that priests and whatnot should not be drunkards, okay? And ministers should not be drunkards. So we've had this problem. And by the way, this isn't just drugs. Alcohol is a drug, okay? Alcohol is a drug. Can I have everyone repeat that after me? Alcohol is a drug, okay? It's one we ignore, okay? Going back to that pandering theme, right? Anyway, and I have a passionate objection to legalizing marijuana because I believe it is not, it's a cave-in, okay? And if you had, this is not for today's course, but you cannot believe the potency of synthetic and adulterated marijuana compared to what you may have experimented with without inhaling, quoting Bill Clinton, right? When you were in college, okay? So the key ally is the addict or the alcoholic. All those references to alcoholism, drugs, there was never any medicinal intervention, ever, until probably 1959. And one of the first things that came on the marketplace was something called antibusin. Antibusin is something that you take and it'll trick your body into thinking it's been formaldehyde poisoned or something, and you get violent withdrawals. So that was our first attempt. And I'm no doctor, okay? I'm merely parroting what I've been taught. And I'm sorry, I won't do that too often. He gets mad when I walk outside the camera. I had to get my water. Anyway, so the next development was a substance called methadone. And by the way, there's a really neat chapter I did not include yet on methadone in here, okay? Methadone is a narcotic. Methadone is an opiate, okay? Methadone is highly addicting. Okay, so that was probably the next thing. You remember with our little diagram of the brain, by the way, how many people thought that diagram of the brain was cool? I thought it was very cool. Those little things that you saw, the pulsating things are the release of the influence of the drug in the reward system. And that's what's going on in what's called the axon and the dendrite. An axon is like a plug and a dendrite is like the receptacle between your nerve cells. But that's what's going on. I thought it was very, very, very cool. I kind of liked her accent too, by the way. She sounds smarter because she had that accent. But so that, she talked about what we call a partial agonist. Remember that part where she said a partial agonist? A partial agonist is similar to what we call Suboxone, buprenorphine. People ever heard of those things? Anybody? Okay, now that's like a cousin of methadone. It's a later variation on the theme. Both of them are, now the medical industry calls them, a person who takes methadone or Suboxone, drug dependent, not drug addicted. They say you're dependent on a drug. Okay? So those two things are themselves addicting. There are stories. I'm a zoning solicitor in Newcastle, and I remember every time a methadone clinic opened up anywhere near our city, everybody was against it. And again, those of you who don't have experience with methadone clinics, and again, they're out there, they're people treating people. For example, they only give them to them on daily dosages, so they have to go back every day. As the methadone wears off and the withdrawal starts to creep in, it's early morning usually. I mean, they are like, depending on their metabolism, they are desperately in need for the next methadone deal, and I'm going to have to turn my phone off here. There are stories of people selling it when they leave their saliva and all to people who are on the street and in withdrawal. Okay, so Suboxone is an opiate, and it's ingested. It's absorbed slower. So if you saw the video, it showed the pulsating reward system to be significantly less than the opiate response. And that's what's going on. You're blunting the cravings, but you're still very much dependent on a daily dosage, probably of either. And the third and last one was the most recent one that's had a dramatic effect, and that is, you saw the word up there, Vivitrol. Anybody hear of Vivitrol? Anybody ever hear of Vivitrol? I'm amazed. Dr. Barber, can you see that? I've asked a room full of very smart people if they've ever heard of Vivitrol, and I keep on telling this to my colleagues all the time. It's amazing. By the way, you're in a very large company. Vivitrol, the doctor will tell you more about it. Vivitrol is not addicting. Vivitrol will block the receptors in the brain, and you can't get high on alcohol or opiates for 30 days. Okay? It comes from a substance called naltrexone. It's a 30-day time-release naltrexone, and I don't want to steal the doctor's thunder, but that's kind of the medicinal interventions all happened very, very recently. Vivitrol was approved by the FDA, I believe it was October 10th, 2011. Several years before that, we had doctors prescribing it on what they call off-label. A doctor can prescribe several things off-label, even if it's not yet approved by the FDA. And Vivitrol is a substance that's not habit-forming, not narcotic, not Suboxone, not methadone. It shuts the receptors down in the brain, okay? And you can't get high. It does not have the narcotic issues that the other cousins of the medicinal interventions do. The doctor that will talk to you in a couple of minutes is part of a group that's opened up. First of all, as Doug introduced you, we're a nonprofit corporation. The nonprofit corporation basically teaches. We are neutral. I don't get paid anything from Vivitrol. I don't get paid anything for Suboxone, methadone, or anybody, okay? I'm not a consultant of the company. I have no stake in it. But we have actually, every time we teach this subject, we're finding more and more people say, can you show me where to find those kinds of treatment people? And we couldn't answer that, so now we're actually answering that. And so the doctor is part of a group called Verifiable Recovery Network. It's verifiable that it works. It's a recovery network. And the two most important, most relevant to what I'm just talking about is TAMAT. We pronounce it TAMAT. T-A, total abstinence. Total abstinence. Total abstinence. Total abstinence. If I get anything out of my mouth that you remember today, total abstinence is what I'm trying to tell you. The person who takes this medicinal intervention is not drug dependent on any of it. Now, of course, you're going to say, make the argument, well, if they need that to not do drugs, they're dependent maybe mentally or something. I'm talking about physiological dependence, okay? So it's total abstinence, medicinal, medical assisted treatment. Those words, MAT, mean medicine assisted treatment. Talk therapy is something that usually happens in Alcoholics Anonymous. Do very fine work. Talk therapy, though, they're very much against any medicinal intervention. I don't know if they're against Vivitrol because Vivitrol is not narcotic. I just don't know. I know that people confuse the Vivitrol intervention with methadone and Suboxone a lot, but it is very clearly different. Okay. Now, having talked all about this science, I think it would be a good idea now to bring a real doctor up here who will talk to you about the science. There is one thing I do want to tell you before I bring Dr. Barber up here, and that is Vivitrol has its weaknesses too. The doctor will explain to you that you can't take Vivitrol unless you have been clean, totally abstinent for a certain period of time. He'll explain that much more eloquently than I can. And so Vivitrol has had its slow growth because of that. There's another thing too. Again, we're talking about human nature. We know that a person who's drug dependent has probably more issues than that, okay? They are many times self-medicating. So we are always talking about having counseling that goes along with that, hunting for and hopefully treating the root causes of the substance abuse cycle. Many times it's more complicated than that. But we are very lucky to bring with me a team teacher today who basically can talk to you about the science of how we can get a person on Vivitrol, because they can't get on the injectable blockade until they're clean. And he's going to talk to you about that, and then he's going to talk to you about the science of Vivitrol, and then he's going to talk to you for a very brief time on the tomorrow of substance abuse that's probably here today. It's tomorrow, meaning that the rest of the people will know about it. And Doc, we're sharing a microphone here, so I've actually taken it off so you can stand and I can go back and get a drink and loaf a little bit while you teach. Dr. James Barber, would you please come to the front of the room? He and I went to high school together. And by the way, we're on camera. None of those other things that were, okay, all right. He's put some things on tape sometimes and ruined a whole film that we're doing right now. But this is Dr. James Barber, and he'll tell you where he came from and where we're going. And I'm going to allow you to clip him, okay?
So if you guys ever need any dirt on Angelo, just let me know, all right? Because growing up in Newcastle, we knew a lot. I appreciate all you being here today. I came up with a saying years ago. Some people have perfect eyesight and zero vision. And that's the truth. How many people you ran into in your life? You know, they can see well, but they have no vision for what the future should be. Today we're sitting here because we have a vision for what we can do to some of these people who are addicted. I mean, all of us in our lives have been through that. You know, how many people in this room have known somebody that's either an alcoholic or drug abuse, or families that know that? Raise your hand if you know them. You know, I always give this talk that, you know, Martin Luther King once said, I have a dream. Well, I have a dream someday somebody stands up in front of people like this and says, hey, raise your hand if you know somebody who's an alcoholic or a drug abuser, and nobody raises their hand anymore. That's a dream we all can have. I mean, you look at some of the things that have gone on in people's lives. I grew up in Newcastle. A good friend of mine passed away 17, 18 years ago from cancer, okay? His uncle was one of the greatest high school football coaches in Pennsylvania history, Lindy Laurel. I wake up one day and my buddy calls me up and says, you know, hey, his son, they found his son out by his car. He had OD'd and died. I know you guys probably heard about it or read in the paper, probably 2 or 3 months ago, one of the Pittsburgh Penguins, another good buddy of mine, 2 Stanley Cups, all this kind of stuff. He was married to a lady who was my patient. She came in the office all the time. She became an alcoholic, drank a lot. Basically, they got divorced. She was in jail for stealing stuff. They put her in detox in jail. She hung herself in jail and killed herself. These are the things we see. Another friend of mine, a plastic surgeon, actually, I took him into my practice in Sewickley years ago. He came in one day and told me his sister and his brother were in New York City. They went to meet their son. They go into the hotel where they're supposed to meet him, and the EMTs are coming out with a gurney on it. His son had overdosed and died, and they were carrying him out of the hotel when they came there. These are the stories we have to stop in this day. Now, we know that when we do this thing, it's time to do this today. I mean, how many people have seen Dead Poets Society, Carpe Diem? We all know that, seize the day. Most people don't do that. It's what we call Carpe Cross, seize tomorrow. You sit around and say, you know what? Tomorrow I'm going to start working out at the gym. Do you do it? Tomorrow I'm going to lose weight. Do you do it? All these people on drugs saying, I'm going to stop drinking tomorrow. I'm going to stop taking these drugs tomorrow. And they don't do it. And a lot of reason they don't do it is because they go through withdrawal. They start it, and a day or two later, they have all the symptoms you said. The anxiety, the sweating, the diarrhea, the nausea, the pain, all these things that drag you down, they have. And they say, listen, I can't go through this. I'm going to take it again just so I can get off it again. And this is what happens. But what if we could break that cycle? What if we could step in and say, hey, listen, let's do something right now to do with withdrawal. And this is what Angelo had talked to you about before. We now have a device that can fit behind the ear. It has 3 little simple leads that go underneath the skin. And it sends a signal, electromodulation, to the brain. All those areas you saw before that tell you those symptoms you have, the limbic system, the amygdala, the areas of the brain that can show that, these send modulation to those areas and shut down those things. So you can't react anymore. You don't feel the nausea. You don't feel the pain. You don't feel this. It affects so close to the central nervous system that it affects the 5th, 7th, 9th, and 10th cranial nerves. You guys don't have to know this stuff. I don't know anything about legal stuff. My daughter and her husband are attorneys, but I don't know anything about legal stuff. But as far as medicine, those affect the things in our body that affect a lot of the responses that we have. So it shuts down those things. It blocks those receptors, so you can't feel the pain anymore. You can't you can't feel the anxiety. And in doing this, what it does is it helps you withdraw. Now, let me give you some statistics. This is an FDA-cleared device, okay? It's gone through studies. And they've shown within 20 minutes, just putting this device on for 20 minutes, it's on the little leads that I talked about, it's on for over 5 days. But within 20 minutes, 62.7% of the symptoms of withdrawal are gone. And it's measured on what we call a COWS score. The COWS score is 0 to 36. You sit there and you fill it out. Do you have nausea? 0 to 4. Do you have pain? 0 to 4. Anxiety, diarrhea, etc. Within 30 minutes, 80% of the symptoms are gone. Within 1 hour, 85% of the symptoms of withdrawal are gone. So what does that tell somebody who's going through withdrawal? Before I tried to do this, it didn't work. You know what? I got a shot now. I'm standing here, and within 1 hour, I don't feel these anymore. I'm feeling pretty good. I can do this. I can do this. So what we do is we get them over that hump. It's a bridge that literally links withdrawal to be able to go where you want to be, the light at the end of the tunnel, that you get over addiction. After 5 days with this device on, 97% of the reduction of withdrawal symptoms. It's something you wear continuously. You can wear it in the shower, just put a little towel over top of it. It doesn't get wet, it doesn't shock you, there's been no side effects. You just want to make sure with this that nobody has any dermatitis there, any infection or the brain. Somebody who has a defibrillator, somebody has a device like that, you don't want to use those on those patients too, because that electrical stimulation can do something. Also, if they're on blood thinners, Coumadin, heparin, or these type of things, you want to be careful with those too, because basically if you stick them with those underneath the skin, you can bleed. Now this really doesn't hurt at all. It's not a nuisance. You can go, walk around, go to the mall, do whatever you want to do with this device on. It basically is like a hearing aid, but what it's doing is shutting down those symptoms. Now what we do, we've carried them over the other side. And in a minute I'll show you some other things we can add in the middle here. But what we do then is we get them over withdrawal to take them to Vivitrol. And as Angelo referred to before, Vivitrol is an antagonist. It blocks the brain, not like Suboxone and these things. Those are agonists. They give you a little bit of a high. This, naltrexone or Vivitrol, blocks it. So you can't take it and get a high anymore. You're not getting high. You're over the withdrawal, you're not getting high anymore. There are some precautions that we talked about. You want to make sure that patient is detoxified, because if you give Vivitrol and they're still taking the medication, they can have some side effects. They can have some serious side effects of the withdrawal symptoms. Because they're agonists, they're not going to get as much of a high anymore. They're going to go ahead and take a whole bunch of medication, a whole bunch of drugs to get this. So they're a little bit here. You're blocking the receptors. They're not getting it. They're getting 10% or 20% of the effect. They're going to take a whole bunch of those, and they can overdose. So you have to watch for that. So what we do during this timing, we'll toxicology screening. We'll do it 2 or 3 times for you. When you come in to make sure you're off it so we can start you. And before we start the Vivitrol, we'll make sure we do a toxicology screening again. And the toxicology screenings we have are tremendous. They can do up to 64 different medications that you're taking. The antidepressants, the benzodiazepines, all the opioids that we talked about. We can tell whether you're taking any of those, whether they're mixing in together and giving you a bad result. So we can now look at you, say, okay, let's take away the symptoms that you had with withdrawal. Let's give you a shot. Now you believe you can do this. And now what we're going to do is going to counsel you. We're going to counsel you. We're going to have people talking to you, psychologically about what caused your problems, what is doing this now. So we can sit there and talk to you and walk you through the tough areas. You know, I got addicted because my mother died, and I was ridiculous. This is what they can do. They can carry you across that bridge to take you to the Vivitrol and do these things. So these are what we do. We can literally block the receptors and not have you get high anymore. But there's some other things we can add in the middle, and I've talked to Angelo about this before. We literally know that some people, for instance, who take medication shouldn't take that medication anymore. And these are things we'll add after the fact. These are things after we detox you. These are things after we get you over. But we can look at you and say, listen, you had surgery years ago. You're what we call a poor metabolizer. That means you only get 28% of the efficacy of that medicine. Usually those medicines are made for the normal population. It's 60, 70, 80% of people who metabolize it goes through their body the same way. There's 20 or 30% of the people who don't metabolize the same way. And in doing that, what ends up happening is they take the medication, and instead of giving 100% of the pain relief, they may only get 28%, which is a poor metabolizer. And in doing so, what they do is take 2 pills, 3 pills, 4 pills to get that high. And doing this, they become addicted to that. We can now test you pharmacogenetically to look at you and say, you shouldn't have taken that medicine in the first place. You're a poor metabolizer. You could die. And literally now we can look at you for life because your genes never change and say, these are the medications you should take, these are the ones you shouldn't take. And you know what? You got addicted because you started taking these. You know, let's test your family too, because your kids could have the same genes you do. They take the same medication you do down the road, or you have surgery 20 years from now and you do it again, you can get addicted again. We literally can start looking at this. You know, people say, can you predict the future? We can never predict the future. The only way to predict the future is to create it, and that's what we're doing. So we can look at these things now and tell you what is good for you, what is not good for you, to be able to go forth in life. So we can put together an entire package now. Withdrawal symptoms, taken away. You're not having them. 85% in 1 hour. We can look at you now, do toxicology screening to make sure we can start the Vivitrol, which is very important for us, and also look at you and say, hey, you're taking this benzodiazepine, this antidepressant, it's combining with these to give you the high. You know, this may not be shipped for you. And now we can go to Vivitrol and basically block the receptors once a month with an injection so you can't get high anymore. And in the meantime, let's test you if you see if this pharmacogenetic is for you and see basically why you shouldn't have done this. Give you an example of that. On the box of Tylenol with codeine, there's a black box warning. It talks about a lady who basically was a normal metabolizer, just like most of us in this room. She had a C-section. They gave her Tylenol with codeine. 30% of women get those. She literally was breastfeeding. She decreased her dosage because she was getting constipated. Her baby was an ultra-rapid metabolizer, a different form. That means instead of getting that medication over 3 hours or 2 hours or 4 hours, they got the medication hitting them within 5 or 10 minutes. The baby was breastfeeding and died just because they were different metabolizers to the medication. And you read in the paper every day now, all these women who are addicts and their children are born and they're breastfeeding these kids and how they're having problems now with opioids and stuff. And people, they literally can die from this or get addicted at birth. These are things we have to stop today. You know, difficult roads often lead to beautiful destinations. We have a shot right now with what we're putting together with VRN to look at these patients who are addicted, alcohol, drug, everything, to look at them and say, hey, listen, we can get you over the hump. Let's do this. Let's set up a program for you. Let's have people talking to you, walking you through the tough times. Let's look at your family and just protect them. And let's put together an entire package that Angelo talked about. It involves religion, it involves medicine, it involves legal activity, that involves psychology, everything in the world that we can put together to say, hey, you and your family now can look at the brighter days and say, there are good days ahead for us like now. You know, you can only see the stars in the darkness. After the darkness, this is where we are. And we can put this together and make a program that can last for life.
Okay, now that takes us to the science, okay? But see, now, again, I think that, again, my background keeps screaming at me. I can basically tell you only what I know. And a lot of it's not because I went to law school. I remember when I coached football, I used to take my kids into a classroom and I used to draw on a blackboard what we were about to do that day in practice. most people have heard of an off-tackle play. An off-tackle play is where two people double team one guy and they kick out block the other guy, and the back is taught to hit that hole like that, and it works, okay? Well, I had to show them on a blackboard what we were going to be doing physically, and it seemed that they got that a lot easier. So we were combining the mental to the physical. And then on the field, they'd get knocked down and their buddy would pick them up and say, good job, and pat them on the back. We were combining the physical through an emotional. So sometimes we as scientists take things all apart, but we forget to put them back together. Substance abuse is an amazingly complicated issue. It's more than science. There's no such thing as a magic shot or a magic hearing aid or anything else. But all of them collaborating, remember we said that would be a big word here, us collaborating, we're finding positive results. We're already silent. But I will never go anywhere in life again without taking a moment in my own head to silently remember Dr. Neil Capretta. He was the chief of staff at Gateway Rehabilitation Center. I'll never forget, he always taught with us in these school programs we have, and he called me, he said, Angelo, I don't know what's going on, but I got this terrible stomach pain, and the doctors tell me they're not letting me go. I can't make it. I mean, he never ever canceled on me. He passed away about, what, 2 months ago? 62-year-old, brilliant doctor. But he says something here in the first couple of minutes that's so powerful that I want to make sure that I share that. But even before that, I want to make sure that I share a remembrance of a dear friend. Go ahead.
He has a
I'll
long
tell
list
you
of
when to.
credentials, and he's the current director of the Gateway Rehabilitation Center, Dr. Capretta.
Thanks, Larry. It's very good to be here. I know you've had a long day. I'm scheduled to talk for about an hour and a half, and I know some of you have to leave, so I won't take it personally. I want to thank Father, first of all, for his remarks. I've been in this field. I'm an addiction psychiatrist. I started my training at St. Francis Hospital in Pittsburgh over 31 years ago. My mentor was Dr. Abram Tversky. He's a rabbi and a psychiatrist. He's written over 65 books. He's very spiritual, and he taught me early on that addiction and basically all illness are biopsychosocial spiritual conditions. We're not treating a virus in a computer. We're treating a very complex human being with mind, body, and spirit. And the better able we do that, the better outcomes we get. I also want to thank him because I have about 60, 70 slides, and he's graciously.
Okay, and that's bio, socio, economic. It covers all issues. Anybody who isn't prepared to collaborate and share academically is really missing the boat from the experience that gifted people like him have taught us. So we already talked about the steel mill town and the emotion of that, and not having a job anymore, not being on workers' comp, being on unemployed, finding any way you can to make it, and drinking and drugs and unemployment and doctors prescribing and whatnot. See, these things all start to come to the surface again. They're really less about any academic area and more about us being darn good neighbors to people. So the key ally, though, is the doctor has indicated to you that we now can take the pain away. Remember now, you can't take the Vivitrol until you have metabolized, did I use the right word, doctor? Metabolize the opiates out of your system, and that usually takes about 6 or 7 days. In the meantime, they're being bombarded with that molecule, that mean morphine molecule that is a lousy, mean lover that's ticked off because they're being neglected. So that device will interfere with that pain long enough that you can get over that pain. Doctor indicated, I believe, in the peer studies, 89% of the people who detoxed with that device went into treatment. Treatment is an industry that talks about 10% of the people getting into treatment. Current studies, the most current information is March 13th, 2013. 8.5% of the United States population over age 12 have a substance abuse problem. That's more than lung, breast, prostate cancer combined. That's 2013 statistic. It's probably higher than that, and reasonable estimates are 40 million, not 25 million Americans. 40 million Americans. Rarely do any of them seek treatment. So, and that's usually why. Let's remember now, this is called collaboration, right? This device will get you detoxed, but what happens when you are detoxed? Do you think there's a likelihood that they're going to run into a trigger and do it again? Okay, that's where the baton is passed to the injectable blockade. These are total separate, different companies. The injectable blockade is the non-addicting, non-narcotic blockade, they call it. You know, you actually have to wear a badge or something on your wrist you should wear if you have Vivitrol in you. If you're in a car accident and somebody's treating you with opiate analgesics because you're screaming because maybe your leg's broken or something, they need to know that because you will not respond to the opiate painkillers. Okay? That's how effective it is. Now think about that. It's so effective that a person can't get high, right? Remember we talked about counseling. Some of these people are self-medicating, and being high is escaping something else. So certainly the next player in this triad, this trilogy, this three-legged footstool is the coordinated counseling so that those issues are talked about too, and you get to the root causes. So at the end of the day, you have a three-legged footstool. Anybody know everybody knows what a three-legged footstool is. Saw one leg off, it's a worthless piece of furniture. Saw any one of those legs off, and we probably have a flawed system. They must collaborate. They must work together. When they do, we now have engaged the addict or the alcoholic in the fight, maybe for the first time ever. World War II. Anybody here watch History Channel like I do, American Heroes Channel? And I get yelled at all the time like, oh my God, are you tired of watching Hitler yet? I mean, Hitler's like always on there. But the war was over in World War II when America joined the battle. I mean, it was over. It was just a matter of time. They were the key ally. Probably would have lost World War II had it not been for America's entry. If there's a key ally in this struggle, if there's any hope, and there's lots of hope, by the way, we need to enlist the power of the addict and the alcoholic. They need to be in the fight with us. They're the key ally. I won't ask for a show of hands, but yeah, emotionally, in your mind, mentally, you would raise your hand. How many people in here are not addicts or alcoholics? None of you are. Most people aren't, okay? Nancy Reagan, remember her 40 years ago? She said, just say no. She had the right answer, except that people didn't have the power to say no. Now we have the power to say no and mean it, okay? If you just say no and have the power to do it, it's literally the most important player in the game. I have a daughter who's, I just texted her. She said, Dad, at school. She's supposed to text me when she gets there. It's every day. I have a son that's my law partner. I talk to him every day. I still think of them all as little babies. Anyway, so my daughter, though, the youngest one, is kind of a tomboy. I always worried about her being made fun of in school and whatnot. She'd wear combat boots to this day. She's a volunteer fireman. She's studying to be a doctor, but she has pictures on Facebook in her turnout gear with a thing down and an oxygen tank and an axe in her hand. She's not somebody who's cost us anything with mascara or any of those other things that girls do. But you know what? Somebody like that would be an easy target in school, wouldn't they? So I used to worry about that. I'll never forget the time. And by the way, she didn't have many friends. She had a few friends, but she was different. She's still different in a special way. Bruce is smiling back there because he knows her. So she's playing softball. She comes up to the plate, and I'll never forget a coach saying, move in, nobody can hit the ball that far, for crying out loud. And you know how the story ends. She hit the ball over top of the concession stand, and if you remember the horrible Zapruder tape and the Kennedy thing, this ball hit some lady's hand who was holding a lime snow cone with her back turned in the next field, and it knocked that lime snow cone everywhere, broke the concession stand, and she's jogging off the bases with her eye black on. She'd have eye black in her, and the kids are patting her on the back. I have told that story 100 times if I've told it once. As I speak, I still have goosebumps. Those are moments that we get high on life. We really do. It's not corny. There are things that happen. Something that went well for you in court. Something that went well with you at home. Those are the things, the little nuggets that get us through. And guess what? That compulsion, that craving is wrapped around their heart, their brain, their core, and everything else. I'm no doctor, but I know that they can't feel the things that we normally feel that get us through a day and getting high on life. So it's very important for this person to be engaged in that battle. Abraham Lincoln, he's my favorite. What an amazing lawyer he must have been, huh? He was an amazing person. But there's some really neat things about his life, and I'm on page 2930 of the book right now. On February 22nd, 1842, by the way, that's Washington's birthday, right? George Washington was his hero. If you read some of these biographies, these are very cool men, in addition to, you know, all the chopping down cherry trees and all that juvenile stuff. Dante, is that my water there?
Right here?
Yes.
No.
Okay, yeah, if I could get another one, thank you. Okay, so I'm just going to read this to you because I want to make sure that we don't miss any of it. And I want to make sure I got it on film too. Because at the Westminster event, Dante, we didn't have time to really develop it, but it's such a cool little story. On or about February 22nd, 1842, long before Abraham Lincoln would have any idea that his birthday would be just as important, as a tribute to George Washington's birthday, he delivered a speech to the Springfield Temperance Society, which says it better than this brief can. And this is Lincoln talking. And again, it is so easy and so common to ascribe motives to men of these classes other than those they profess to act upon. The preacher, it is said, advocates temperance because he is a fanatic. The lawyer, from his pride and vanity of hearing himself speak. The hired agent, for his salary. But when one who has long been known as a victim of intemperance bursts the fetters that have bound him and appears before his neighbors clothed and in his right mind, a redeemed specimen of long lost humanity, and stands up with tears of joy, trembling in eyes, to tell of the miseries once endured, now to be endured no more forever, of his once naked and starving children, now clad and fed comfortably, of a wife long weighed down with woe, weeping and broken-hearted, now restored to health, happiness, and renewed affection, and how easily it all is done once it is resolved to be done. However simple his language, there is a logic and an eloquence in it that few with human feelings can resist. They cannot say he or she desires a union of church and state, for he is not a church member. They cannot say he is vain of hearing himself speak, for his whole demeanor shows he would gladly avoid speaking at all. They cannot say he speaks for pay, for he receives none, then asks for none. Nor can his or her sincerity in any way be doubted, or his or her sympathy for those he or she would persuade to imitate his or her example be denied. That's in 1842, long before we ever heard of bridges, long before we ever heard of Vivitrol, long before we ever had counseling and psychiatry and all that stuff. And you know what? It goes all the way back then, and it still exists today, that a human being, when they have resolved to do something, can do anything. I believe I stand before you knowing that I am living proof that anybody can do anything. The hardest years of my life were getting in that car as an assistant principal, ignoring my 2 young kids, and heading to Pittsburgh every day for something I didn't know if I'd ever graduate, I didn't know if I'd ever pass the bar exam or all that stuff. All I'm saying is that humans have an amazing ability to become so special when they have to. And when we engage them, and science has allowed us, doctor, my hat's off to medical science, we really have something. But again, it all has to come together. It has to collaborate. We now are going into the community section, and it all comes down to passion. I teach a CLE class on practice management later this afternoon, and I teach with Alexander Lindsay, and Alexander Lindsay's from Butler. He teaches trial tactics at Pitt, and he teaches in our school program. And the one thing we always talk about is how the young guys don't seem to have any passion, or the young girls don't seem to have any passion. I mean, I don't know, it's just lawyers, by the way. I mean, it seems to me if you can't have passion for what you do, you need to do something else. I did it 5 times, by the way, in my life. I was a teacher, a football coach, then I became an assistant principal in a high school, and then I became a prosecuting attorney, and now I'm involved in Jimmy. God knows where we're going to end up on what we're doing now. But again, it's whatever lights you up, you know? There's something in you. It's your heart. The heart is such an amazing thing. It's just, it's beyond description. Nobody's ever really going to capture that. But I am offering a $100 reward, and I mean it. I'll give it to you today for somebody who can actually find me the poet who said this, because I don't know who said it. But it's on page 31. A poet once said, food, shelter, clothing are all vitally important, as they are the necessities to sustain life. But truth, art, love, spirit, law are why we exist at all. When you don't have a why you exist, and you're just existing, then I think that you need to find something else. And I'm not lecturing you, but I'm saying this is so, Jimmy and I have been we've had so much fun working on stuff we already knew. We already knew that getting high on life, it sounds corny, but quite frankly, it is an accepted fact that you can get high on life. Question, how many people in here know the song that has generated more royalties than any other song in the existence of music in America? What song generated more royalties than any other song?
White Christmas.
Who said White Christmas? Okay, White Christmas is vote for White Christmas. Anybody else?
Happy birthday.
Thank you. Nobody, guess what? Happy birthday. When you go to Chi-Chi's, you ever see those, if people do, I get crazy. I want to throw all my food on whoever comes around and say, happy birthday. You know, you can't sing happy birthday because it has royalties you would have to pay. That's why restaurants don't do it. It has generated more royalties than any other song most of you knew that. You just didn't know you knew it, okay? So that's what we know things we just don't know, or maybe we forgot we knew, or maybe we forgot to do something about them. So again, passion is what it's about. Said another way, one of my heroes is Theodore Roosevelt. Theodore Roosevelt is a person who was very passionate, and he's a person who never missed a conflict. Do you know he once made a speech after he took a bullet? He had a bullet in his chest and still made the speech, and went and got the bullet taken out. An assassination attempt. Other little known history fact, by the way, he was supposed to be buried as a vice president. Nobody wanted him. He was ticked off the Republicans and the Democrats. Nobody really wanted him to be president. So he made him vice president, know that we could bury him there. And McKinley dies, 3 or 4 months later, in September, very frankly. Next month, McKinley, the anniversary of McKinley's death. Another little known fact, do you know that Robert Lincoln sat with his dad and watched him die minute by minute in that newspaper column. And Robert Lincoln witnessed 2 other assassinations. He was physically present for 3 assassinations. Would you invite him to your inauguration? Anyway, McKinley was one of them. Trivia question, what other assassination did Robert Lincoln witness? Ready? Garfield? Okay, you can Google. Anyway. This is Theodore Roosevelt. It's not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbled or where the doer of deeds could have done the better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood who strives valiantly, who errs and comes up short again and again, who knows the great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at worst, at least, fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those timid souls who know neither victory or defeat. Lawyers in history are traced clear back into Paul Johnson, Every History. I've given you an excerpt on page 32. And it talks about the convention in Philadelphia, again, and sat for 4 months, breaking up September 17th, 1887. Its work triumphantly done. In the middle of the paragraph, most were planters, landowners, or merchants. A number had served in the army. There were 26 college graduates, 9 from Princeton alone, but probably the most important single element were the lawyers. The finest government that's ever existed, and it's got its problems for sure, is a free government, and it comes from lawyers. And it's the lawyer who has made the difference. Further down, there was true, that was true, agreed Hamilton. Unlike farmers, planters, merchants, they had no vested economic interest in advance and therefore formed a natural ruling elite and ought to form the bedrock of public life. And it talks about all of those things. And I go on for more history. And that takes us now into some of our ethical. Remember, you're getting an ethical credit too. And the first rule that becomes important is your competency rule. Okay? A lawyer shall provide competent representation to a client. Competent representation requires the legal knowledge, skill, thoroughness, and preparation necessary for representation. And if you go to the comment of that section, it says in the middle, page 34, perhaps the most fundamental skill consists of determining what kind of legal problems a situation may involve, a skill that necessarily transcends any particular specialized knowledge. So, I mean, do we sit there and say, okay, somebody choose you a possession with intent to deliver? Did they Mirandize you? Did they read you your rights? Were you in custody? Can they prove this? I mean, it seems to me that rule on competence is broad enough that I think that you should understand what's causing this person to commit these crimes and maybe, just maybe, eliminate the cause. And if you eliminate the cause, then your mind should immediately go to sentencing. Your mind should immediately go to the disciplinary board. Your mind should immediately go to the real estate commission that's trying to revoke the license, to the CDL people, to the employer, and say, how about if I am solution-oriented and the major cause of this altercation, this problem, this legal problem, I can take that away. And let's go backward most conservatively. Dr. Barber talked about changing the person the way they live, not just talking about how keeping them alive. We're changing the way they live. So what more wonderful feeling could you have when somebody leaves your office after they were your client and are no longer an alcoholic or an addict? Wow. My paralegal back there and I have said, wow, what, over 100 times. It's amazing how you see these faces. They come back, they almost always put on more weight, and they always look filled out, and they're usually employed again. And it's really such a thing. Now that's not something I was taught in law school, but I think I was taught that in life. And I think I'm using my God-given talents or whatever I was taught in law school to get there. Okay? So it's like the ultimate perfect opportunity. And Dante, I'm going to try again with the video. It works so far. You've got the remote, right?
Although a person facing an addiction, health, and/or criminal problem, as well as other problems at the same time, would appear to be in the midst of the perfect storm, that time-sensitive early intervention opportunity can, and almost always does, form the basis of a perfect solution. Imagine taking the negative from the legal and health problems and lifting the addict out of harm's way, using the negative energies and power of both systems to create the perfect solution, a perfect environment for long-term recovery.
Okay, so what have we done? We have taken a person with a health problem and a person with a legal problem in all of life has the two worst problems at the same time. We have taken them and made them work against each other. We are home to 25%. We are home to 5% of the world's population, the United States of America. 5% of the world's population lives here. 25% of the world's prison population live here. 5% of the world's population live here. 25% of the world's prison population live here. 94% of every incarcerated female in Pennsylvania is there because of substance abuse. That's bad, right? So if we have a bad thing, we can actually drive the solution for both, okay? Rarely do I have somebody come to my office more motivated than a person who's going to go to jail if I can't figure something out. And now that we can detox them, and again, it's not just criminal law. The lawyer has an amazing forum to operate from. Number one, the criminal law. That's obvious. Number two, disciplinary law, if somebody's about to lose their license. Number three, school and college expulsion. Number four, anti-nuptial agreements, custody agreements. We have all kinds of ways that the legal problem can connect with the health solution and form what used to be a perfect storm into a perfect opportunity. A perfect storm to a pessimist, to somebody that sits on the sideline, to somebody that doesn't want to lead, somebody that wants to follow, somebody that wants to walk into court and read it back to the judge and say, I'm done. That's what Bill does. That's what everybody does. Somebody who will think outside the box can turn a perfect storm into a perfect opportunity and have a perfect day. That's passion. Feeling that is better than any black tar opium that anybody could ever give me. It works for me. I'm hoping it'll work for you too. And with our medical community and the collaboration we have now, we now know that we are fulfilling way beyond anybody else. Rule 1.1 on competency on page 34. Perhaps the most fundamental legal skill consists of determining what kind of legal problems or situation may involve a skill that necessarily transcends any particular specialized knowledge. That you go home and be proud that you're a lawyer that day. The next area this comes up is highlighted in your book, and it takes us into Loeffler. How many people in here in law school remember, maybe you didn't have it, but at Duquesne I had it, I don't know if it was elective, but it was called Conflicts of Law. Anybody have Conflicts of Law? Okay. They still, Loeffler, did you have the little red book? It's Loeffler Writes Conflicts of Law. Conflicts of Law is really a cool course. Many times if you read Conflicts of Law, and it's kind of like a logical thing back and forth, but conflicts don't actually, there really are no conflicts sometimes. And I can tell you right now, I go up to the other attorney, I think I want to know what he wants. So if I know what the other attorney wants, and it's something I don't care, or something I want to, that's really, why chance it on how the judge is going to rule on some of these issues and facts and law, not only facts and law found, but how they're applied to the situation. Case in point, walk into a courtroom. I'm standing there with a defendant. The judge is looking at his watch. The judge is going to get paid on Friday the same way anyway. The prosecutor is going to get paid the same. So he doesn't care, and he's probably unhappy that you made him work for that defendant. Okay? I'm not saying judges are lazy, I'm saying prosecutors are lazy. I'm telling you, human beings would rather sit and drink coffee and talk about the football game than work and have 50 cases standing back there, and we're going through them all. Judges have to work their butts off in sentencing, by the way, and we'll get to that hopefully if I remember. But if I know that the prosecutor doesn't want my man to leave there and be drunk again or on drugs again and kill a family of 12 in a head-on car crash, I know I want that too, okay? I really don't want that either. So is there a conflict? No. And by the way, it spells out the various conflict analysis directly from Loeffler on page 36 and 37. But not only do we not have a conflict, we both want the same thing. The second thing is my guy doesn't want to go to jail. He doesn't want him to go to jail either, the prosecutor. The judge wants him to go to jail even less. That's $75 a day of taxpayers' money. And if he's in jail, he can't work. And if he can't work, there's no withholding. And the kids are going to go to foster care. If the mom is one of those people in Pennsylvania, there's a whole cascade of bad outcomes for the system. So I think we both want that too. But what the judge wants most of all is not to see this guy again. Recidivism, we call that. So if the judge doesn't want to see him again, and the prosecutor doesn't want him to kill somebody so that he looks like he's weak, and I have a realistic opportunity, a real, verifiable treatment plan, wow. We're all high-fiving each other, right? The only question is, do they believe me? Many times they don't, and you have to fight for that in court. Do you think I felt good when that judge, and it's a true story, do you think I felt good or a little bit embarrassed? I'm standing there, there's 25 people in that bar waiting for their client. I'm some hotshot that walks in from a different county, and I'm making this speech about mens rea and stuff, and blockades and all that stuff, and the judge goes, Mr. Paper, why do I need to hear any of this? Do you think I wasn't embarrassed? Of course I was embarrassed. I felt bad. He humiliated me in front of everybody. But you have to fight through that and say, I think it's because you're about to sentence him and take away his family, his freedom, and maybe his job. I don't know. I mean, I didn't say it that smart alecky, but I said it. One of the strengths I have, going back to my background, is I've been turned down by employers, potential dates, more than the sheets in the United States Navy, probably. I can handle rejection. It's a job to do, okay? And we have a job to do. And it's more than a job. It's a calling. Now that we're armed with something, more than that, we're armed with competence and we're armed with science. So we have now used, in a very elementary example, the competing interest analysis. I think if you're a lawyer in any field, that you need to always know, what does the other guy want? And I'll be honest with you, many times it's something you can give him. And it's something that you want, he's probably willing to give you. And why would you risk the results of a court hearing? Now, one of the reasons you can't do that, and that's probably for next class, and you can't do that is if you're some smart aleck that treats your opponent like he's a jerk or whatever. Hey, this is a business where we disagree for a living. You can disagree without being disagreeable. One of the first things I do, I prepare my client for it. I'm going to walk up to them and shake the other attorney's hand as soon as I see him. Hey, how you doing? Oh, wow, you have a suntan. Did you just go back from vacation? Yeah, where'd you go? There's nothing wrong with that. I'm a former athlete. I know that when I walk in between those 55-yard wide and 100 yards long football field, I'm going to knock that crap out of you to win the game. But that doesn't mean I need to be an idiot outside the field. So that professionalism is a little vignette I just threw in there. Now, let's take this into the world of criminal law for you criminal law attorneys. And if you listen to what I'm about to tell you, I think it'll make your life easier. But you remember now, I'm notorious for being the guy that is the tall man in the theater. And I've been told by judges in Virginia, right, Bruce? He said, no, you didn't hurt your client, but you are annoying. That's what the judge said. Okay. Anybody ever hear of Rule Criminal Procedure 570? I'm telling you, nobody uses it. Okay, 570, it's in your book, page 39. 570, pretrial conference. At any time after the filing of an information, upon motion or upon its own motion, the court may order the attorney for the Commonwealth and the defense attorney or a pro se defendant to appear before it for a conference in open court unless agreed by the defendant to be in chambers to consider. And I'm not going to read through everything there. I'm looking for the one I really want to say. Subsection 6, such other matters as may aid in the disposition of the proceeding. Subsection 6. The first time I did it, I was approached, you could tell the judge says, who the heck do you think you are? I got enough conferences and hearings going on. You're not going to make me do more. But when they started realizing that I was serious and our treatment strategies were serious, think about all the time you can save. Now listen, you don't have that problem where the judge is standing with 50 people waiting for you and say, why do I need to hear this? Okay, we now have a conference, and sometimes I'll put it right in the motion. You have a right to have a motion to have this conference. And that's when the prosecutor's not on stage, the rest of everybody's not looking at him to see if he's tough on crime or whether the judge is a pushover or whatnot. You got to pull your client out of the matriculation of that criminal proceeding and get to that conference and tell the judge, how does this relate to the disposition of the case? Your Honor, this skips everything. It skips the trial. It skips the guilty. It skips sentencing. It's going to give you more than you could ever want from your client. It's amazing what it's going to do. So, again, once you establish your credibility, that is such a perfect place to bring in your treatment strategy. Now, if you go beyond page 39, and I know Jim Donahue understands that, and Jim, you know the game. The prosecutors like to force you to show up in the hallway and say, take a plea or go to trial, right? Especially Allegheny County. Anybody work Allegheny County criminal system? Okay, it's very much that way. At that point in time, this is where it gets really good on the word collaboration. Okay, I have a relationship with several addiction physicians. And if you look at page 42, and James, this should hit you right in the wheelhouse too, Dr. Barber. It is our assessment process. It actually is an assessment of the individual in which there's two things that this assessment does that no other assessment does. It creates salient findings, 5 or 6 of them, and salient treatment/defense recommendations. From that, we actually get into a behavioral modification contract on page 45. The behavioral modification contract has, I don't have it there because it's 125 paragraphs the last time I looked at it, but the behavioral modification contract has several key features. One, that there are parties to the contract. Do you know, anybody here involved in contract law at any time ever in your career, either side? Yes, okay. You know, a good contract is something nobody ever looks at after they sign it. What does a good contract do? It reminds everybody what they agreed to, okay? So this behavioral modification contract can remind the defendant that he or she has agreed to take the medication, whatever that is. He or she has agreed that somebody in their family is a liaison, okay? Because sometimes, especially in the beginning, they're not clear-headed. So we have a multiple party contract in which we have a family liaison who's going to see to it that they comply. The behavioral modification contract says that the defendant wants this contract incorporated by reference into a sentencing order. Wow. Guess what? Binding. extended care plan. Binding extended care plan. Remember I told you there's several things that are going on here. One, the pain-reduced rapid detox. 2, the application of the blockade. 3, the coordinated total abstinence MAT counseling. And 4 now, all of it in an individually prescribed, from an assessment, behavioral modification contract. This, by the way, that contract is 120 paragraphs. It started out as 25. In our 15 years, we just started getting better ideas. Every time a prosecutor or a judge pushed back, we tweaked it a little bit. So we now have an extended care plan. Dr. Jim Barber, for example, I could be in court and Dr. Barber, I just basically text him and he sends me the assessment and the behavioral modification contract, which is the long-term extended care plan that I basically ask the court reporter what her text is and I send it to her and she prints it and incorporates it in court like that. Now, what the heck does a sentencing proceeding do? Well, the first thing it does is they bring you into court and tell you all your appeal rights. The second thing it does, there's a bunch of people standing there. Third, adult probation has to do a pre-sentence investigation that basically arrives at all of these things for purposes of tailoring the treatment. And by the way, it's not very tailored at all. What do we know about one size, you as consumers? Remember now, the main professions, education, law, and medicine. What do we know about one size? One size fits nobody, not even its intended person. If you want to do cookie cutter practicing of law and sentencing and things like that, and you're dealing with medications and you're dealing with medical issues, shame on you if you think that you can have a cookie cutter approach and just stamp them out like that. There has to be, now it's not all that much, but that's where that assessment comes from that has salient findings. Billy Doe presented with a history of using opiates. Billy Doe was addicted because he had a car accident, he broke his arm and he just can't get off of it. Billy Doe has tried and he can't. Billy Doe is going to lose his job. Those are findings. It is recommended that Billy Doe get detoxed, that Billy Doe apply the injectable blockade, and that Billy Doe be tested periodically, and Billy Doe sign a 6-month extended care plan with the criminal court, with the disciplinary board, with his significant other, with the custody judge, with the employment. Employment is a wonderful area. Okay, you're lawyers. I say, I fire Bruce, my paralegal. Okay? And in the world of really what normally happens, first place he's going to go is file unemployment, right? There's litigation there. Let's suppose he's going to file a wrongful termination. And we know we're in at-will and all that, so bear with me a little bit. He's going to go file unemployment, and he's also going to file wrongful termination. The employer now has to defend wrongful termination. He's probably not going to win wrongful termination in a strong at-will state, but he's going to try it because it's his last shot. He's got no paycheck, right? He's got retirement money or whatever. All kinds of litigation back and forth, and he's probably not going to be successful. How about if somebody says, time out? Mr. Employer, how about if we give you a last chance employment contract in which he waives all those rights and he won't go there if it doesn't work, in consideration of you allowing him to have a long-term extended care plan engrafted into his employment contract and give him one more chance? I'm telling you, it works. It works. Again, it can't work unless your mind can think outside the box into collaboration, into conflict of law resolution, into solution-oriented, rather than let's drag this thing out, let's make it go, let's keep it going. Billable hours racking up through the roof. Nobody's happy when that's over, including you. You don't feel very good about yourself because you didn't really help anybody. Who the heck wants to get paid for doing that? And you start wondering about even the career and the profession. But all of those, those pages, for those of you who read this book in the future, page 39 And if you look at Rule 570, criminal procedure, it has a parallel in civil procedure. Does anybody know what rule that is? 312? Okay? I think it's 312. Don't hold me to that. You might want to check. But I'm pretty sure it's 312. 312 is a pretrial issue, pretrial order. You know what most people use 312 for? The day you're going to pick a jury, civil trial. It's two conferences before you actually, and the judge trying to twist your arm to both of you settle. But 312 has a provision too, by the way. It says on anything that might help in the disposition of the case. You want to do your job, a good job for your client, even if it's not drug related, get a 312 conference and make that person come to court, all the parties, and have a judge. In Mercer County, by the way, I commend them. They actually have 312 conferences now required, even if you file only a writ of summons. I mean, within weeks, you're going to be in front of a judge asking, what's this about? Get out of my courthouse, you know. And they're leaning on everybody to settle. So a 312 in civil and a 570 in criminal can get you that one important shot where you can get that person who has that binding extended care behavioral modification contract. Let's talk about whether you, let's talk about the worst scenario. You fail. Nobody's going to, they won't give you that. I can tell you right now, the kid, the guy, the woman's eventually going to get out of jail anyway. They need to get this under control. We're going to save their life. Even if they would relapse, at least they know the way back home, that these things are out there. So that's page 39 and page, and that Lexis head notes are in there through 41. The next most important page is 42, page 42, the assessment. And I'm not talking about 50 pages of findings. You read these custody things that they hammer out, and these psychologists, and they show up. Boy, they're talking about whether somebody opened the bottle cap with their teeth or whatever. I'm talking about basic salient findings, salient recommendations. You know what else that does too? The defendant now might, hey, a doctor-client relationship, an attorney-client relationship sometimes doesn't go well, and they want to close. Every single defendant should have the right to have a new doctor or have a new attorney. And so by having those salient findings and recommendations, the new guy can pick up where the old guy left off and take a look at those findings. And now we have interchangeability with regard to professional and personal variations that kind of like are as diverse as the number of shoe sizes in this room, you know. So that's page 42. 43, 44 is the assessment. And notice on page 45, it is signed by the professional and verified under oath. The doctor needs to say, I spent time with this person. The doctor needs to say that there's a legal reasoning, a medical reasoning behind this, or that assessment, to me, is respectfully submitted as worthless. Then, of course, the behavioral modification contract is the follow-up. And again, I didn't put the whole contract in there. I just put the highlights in there. For example, routine assessment, liaison, working. Okay, working. Anybody remember Maynard G. Krebs? That's way in the back. Anybody know Maynard G. Krebs, so you can show me how old you are? Maynard G. Krebs used to say, work! He used to go like that. We couldn't handle work, okay? Again, idle hands and all that stuff like that. It really is true that if you work, you will feel better about yourself. So we require that the person work or be in school getting himself a better job. But you can't just sit at home. And again, what do we know about what Dr. Barber told us? We know that the pain-free detox is outpatient. Pain-reduced detox, rapid detox is outpatient. I'm not saying pain-free, FDA, okay? We know that the blockade lasts for 30 days, but again, that's outpatient. So the most important part about this is the inpatient business. What's it cost, like $35,000, $40,000 a month now for in-house rehabilitation? You're not going to work while you're doing that. So anyway, now, we know that we have a very cool message. And so I stood there like this going, teaching CLE classes maybe twice a year, and I'd have some fine people like you pay attention to me, and that would be next until August again. So I said, I want to do it more often. So I went back to my roots, and we decided to do a program in the schools. Dr. Barber and Doug, question. What's the cheapest and most effective treatment program there is? Proven over and over again.
Total abstinence.
Prevention, right?
Prevention, total abstinence.
And where are we going to prevent substance abuse? In the schoolhouse, before it happens. Now we're going to miss some terrible that happens, but we're going to prevent it that way. Jim, don't go anywhere yet. Oh, okay. Okay, so we're going to prevent in the schoolhouse. Okay? Well, one of the problems with preventing is that you have to have an engaging message. When I was an assistant principal in a high school, they used to call me Buford Pusser. Anybody remember that movie, Walking Tall? That's what they called me. I could go in a cafeteria and fold my arms like this, and in seconds there'd be total silence. I was a little bigger back then. I was lifting weights. I was a football coach and all that. But now I think if I did that, somebody would hit me in the head with a sandwich or something and throw me through the window. I don't know. It's different now. I guess it's different. So what is not different, however, is that kids are still kids, and kids are still engaged. Kids like to be engaged. We know there's lawyer jokes out there, and hopefully you won't tolerate them anymore. Al Lindsay doesn't allow anyone to tell a lawyer joke in his office, you know. And just because. That's his world. Not that he doesn't have a good sense of humor. He says, I'm a very serious professional, and I'm a very serious profession. If you don't respect that, blah, blah, blah. So in the legal profession, we have found that there's most of the popular shows that have existed throughout a long period of time have been the shows about lawyers. People still like lawyers. People are fascinated with lawyers. You're fascinated with lawyer shows, probably. We found something that's a real treasure. What you're about to see is, like, did you ever see the Blair Witch Project, that movie? These kids made a movie. It was about their graduation day. The graduation day happens, and it's all on film. And what's about to happen is it's like a 22-minute thing. It'll take us almost right up to where I have my closing with you guys and get you a good bang for your buck today, I think.
Good evening. I'm Dan Rather. At the end of each school year, millions of high school students celebrate the end of one chapter of their lives and the beginning of a new one. They celebrate this on their graduation day.
The graduating class of 2005.
Students everywhere are filled with hopes and dreams for a bright future. Tonight, we will look at the story of 4 childhood friends whose typical graduation day turned out to be anything but. Meet 17-year-old Kelly Garner. Like most teenagers, he likes hanging out with friends and going to the movies. Kelly plans on attending the University of Southern California in the fall to study film production. In his spare time, he likes to shoot movies of his friends with his own personal video camera. What happened on June 6th?
Well, it was our graduation day, and I wanted to document it. So I started filming everything that happened starting in the morning.
That morning, using himself and his best friends as his subjects, Kelly began filming.
2 hours and 30 minutes, I will officially be out of high school. What's up, college? Here I come.
He would videotape everything from putting on his cap and gown to the party at the end of the night.
Clean this up a little bit. Look, I'm trying to keep all this stuff together with your
Mom,
hair.
I'm trying to film.
Oh,
Please?
okay.
All right.
Clean up.
What was it you were trying to capture?
Honestly, I didn't really know. I just wanted to make something we'd all remember.
And remember it they would. During the ceremony, Kelly sat next to his close friend, Sophie Davis.
It has given us an opportunity to learn, to explore, and to grow in a healthy environment. As each of us leaves here, truly no limit to what we can achieve.
And student, and your class president, Mr. Jake Matthews.
Years has been spent anticipating the next. So for today, let's enjoy this moment. Because before you know it, it'll all be over. God bless. Last chance.
The students laugh as Kelly's other best friend, Ben Chase, heckles Jake on stage.
Because tomorrow we're going to wake up and no longer be high school students. Hope so. Shut up. So guys, let's make today the best day of our high school career.
So good. That was awesome.
Why is your hat different?
Oh my God! Another comment. Introduce you to the graduating class of 2005.
Here we see Sophie Davis, Kelly's childhood friend, and Jake's girlfriend for over 2 years. A straight-A student on her way to Yale, Sophie has a lot to be celebrating. Let's go back to graduation day. Tell me about the ceremony.
It was beautiful. Everyone looked really nice in their gowns.
And Jake's speech, how did he do?
He was great. I think he did really well. It went well. The entire time, Ben was yelling at him from the audience, which didn't help, but that's Ben.
Ben Chase is fellow classmate and longtime friend of the group. He and Jake played on the varsity football and baseball teams together.
Craziest parties. When has Mikey's party never been?
I don't even know.
Yeah, baby, class
Oh,
dude,
baby,
yeah!
Hey, you're sitting on the lens, man.
Hey, yo, we going to Mike's party tonight or what? Oh, dude, for sure.
After the ceremony, Kelly would take his camera around, joking with the principal and talking to friends and family.
Principal Brown, what did you think of Jake's speech?
It was excellent. I just have to touch it. I'm sorry. You gotta get a good shot right here.
Yeah,
me and Mr. Brown going on.
Spent a lot of time in my office, I'll tell you.
It's because of this kid right here. It wasn't my fault. I'm an athlete. I got out of everything.
Hey!
Dad, what's going on?
Hey! Mr. M, what did you think of your son's speech?
Chip off the old block. Kid's gonna be president of the United States one day. I wouldn't go that far, but...
Mom.
Kelly, I'm so proud of you.
I'm proud of you.
You are.
Yeah, because I want you to pay for my college. Did you like the speech?
I cried.
Yeah.
I cried.
It was very nice. He did a great job. You cried, really?
I did. I'm sentimental.
There she is.
No,
Christy
I know.
and Sophie sitting
Well,
in a tree,
exactly.
talking
I know,
about
I
clothes. What are you guys doing?
We were talking about clothes, like you just said.
How did I know?
Okay.
All they do is talk about clothes. They're weird.
So, yeah. Can we go, Jakey?
Bye. Bye. I love you. Christy. Christy, I'll see you tonight, okay?
Bye.
In a rare moment, we see Kelly, our cameraman, when one of his friends takes the camera and turns it on him.
No, come on, man. All right, why don't you say something clever for a change?
You blow, Logan.
Oh, come on.
Thanks, man.
Clever.
Have a good one.
Clever.
I'll see you at my... No, I probably won't.
Later, Kelly steals a moment with his longtime friend Sophie.
Thought you and Jake left.
No, I'm still waiting on Mr. Popular over there.
I swear that kid talks more than the chick does.
Oh, is that so?
Yeah, does more.
We should tell him you said that then.
Yeah?
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 Yeah.
You would?
Yes, I will.
Dude, I'm just joking, I swear.
It actually has a bunch of... Ah, now it's fogged up.
Fogged it up, are you kidding? Thank you.
No, thank
for
you.
being so hot.
Have you seen Jake around?
After joking about her boyfriend, Jake, they begin discussing what all kids seem to be thinking about on this day, their future.
I can't believe it's all over.
What do you mean?
Like high school, you know? It's all over, like it's done.
Well, tonight's not done. Because, you know what we're gonna do tonight?
What?
We're a party! What's up? Yeah, that's what we're doing. We're partying,
Yeah. But then what?
baby.
Let me tell you. Then it'll be tomorrow. And then all of a sudden it'll be August. And then we'll all go away to school and that'll be that.
Yeah?
But, I mean, what do you have to worry about? I mean, you and Jake are fine, so you don't have to worry about that
Yeah,
or
I
anything
mean-
else.
Can you stop filming for 2 seconds, please? Really, Kelly? Like, Jake's my best friend, and not being able to see him every day is gonna be weird, you know?
Hey!
What's up, bro? It's ready to go?
What took you so long?
Friend that Kip's a brother. You know, we're just talking about some frat stuff.
Frat stuff? You'd be into the whole, like, fraternity scene?
Jake the frat boy.
I hadn't really thought about it, but maybe.
Fun.
Ooh, go get her,
I don't
dude.
know.
She's
I
mad.
just don't really see you as attractive.
Oh, are you
I'm getting this.
Oh, is my little Sophie
No,
mad?
I'm not
Come
mad.
here. Are you mad?
I'm not mad.
Come here. There's nothing to worry about.
I'm not mad. It's
Let's go. There's nothing to worry about.
Okay, fine. Turn that freaking camera off, Kelly.
All right. I'm turn it off.
Later that night, Kelly would go pick up his best friends, Jake and Sophie, on his way to their graduation party. It would be the beginning of a night they would never forget.
All right, so we're at Jake's house, and we're gonna pick him up, and we're gonna go to this little party, and we're gonna get some girls, you know? That's what we're gonna do. Hello? Yo, Jake, time to party. Yo, where are you?
Hey, what up?
Yo, you're not naked, right?
No.
All right. Yeah, dude.
Kelly and Jake have been friends for almost 13 years, growing up only blocks away from each other.
I gotta fix my hair. My name's Jake. I gotta fix my hair. I have to look good for the ladies.
Well, what took you so long?
I had to get ready. Dude, Sophie looks so hot in this picture.
Wow, which one?
That one.
Dude, she's right here. That's a picture of your mom. See, look, there's you as a baby, right there. And that's your dad.
Yeah, why don't you go get ready, man? Shut up, man. Dude, you didn't win all these trophies.
Hey, dude.
I don't know, dude. Hey, Mr. Athlete. Let's go, dude. Seriously, it's party time, man.
Let me see. I'm gonna do a little situation for you. Brittany's right there. Let's see you do your fly magic on her. All right, let's see it. Did you really just lick your finger and touch your eyebrow? Did you really just...
Stop, man. Yo, Ben. Ben, what's up, homie? Brittany. What's up, baby? Come here. Give me some sugar. Give me some sugar.
Get away from me, you creep. I'm sorry. She probably said something worse than that. Here, that was too nice. Want to do it again?
So what are you guys trying to do here?
I was showing Jake how to pick up girls.
Well, did it work?
No.
After joking around, the two leave for the party. But listen carefully as they do.
Give me the camera. We're leaving. We're leaving. Get my hat. We're going. And guess what? You're driving.
Why?
Because I'm gonna get f***ed up.
Well, yeah, I want to do it too.
Yeah, dude.
And that line there, what did you say?
I said you're driving because I'm going to get messed up.
And what does Jake say?
He says, yeah, I'm drinking too.
On their way to the party, they pick up Jake's girlfriend, Sophie.
No, dude, I'm serious. It smells in here. Here we are pulling up at Sophie's house. All right, I'll hurry. All right, dude. Ringing the doorbell.
Kelly, waiting in the car, decides to do somewhat of a colorful commentary on what he sees.
Oh, hey, Jake. Come on in. Maybe we can hang out.
Oh, no, I think I'm gonna stay out here. I'll just wait for Sophie, you know.
If Sophie wasn't dating you, I'd probably date you. You're so my type. Oh, hey, baby.
What's up, girl?
Hey. No, Soph, your boyfriend is really hot. I would do him.
Hey, that's my main man right there. Call me later so I can come and hit on some 18-year-old girls and give them a little graduation present. You know what I'm talking about? I know you do.
Oh, give me a hug. You're so sweet. All right, I love you.
All right. Hey, be sure you call me, Jake. Oh, look how cute the couple is. You guys ready to get f***ed up? I'm sorry. You want front seat?
Of course.
What are you playing drums for? Oh, this is gonna be insane! Let's go! Yeah, so we're here walking up to the party. Yo, Jake.
Walking up to Mikey's house, we got 4 kegs up in the speed.
Best friends since 3rd grade.
Third.
Where's my class boys?
Vámonos!
Now tell me about the party.
It was like really any other party. People were hanging out, drinking, having fun.
You guys drank a lot?
No. Not a lot, but it's high school, and kids drink, and at a party, it's basically a given, so not a lot, no, but on occasion.
What up, ladies? Wanna make out? Like kiss me.
So drunk. She's going nowhere.
Whoa, who is this over here?
In the midst of the chaos, Kelly captures a tender moment between Jake and Sophie.
Oh, that's my boy. You.
What's going on over here?
The partying would continue as Jake and his friends played a game known as beer pong.
Yes, you gotta take a shot too.
Jake, Ben, and even Sophie take shot after shot, cheered on by their classmates.
You gotta take a shot now.
And if you make it,
Let's go.
She's gonna serve for me.
Is Sophie gonna play?
You'll make it. You'll make it.
I'm right here. I'm right here.
Concentrate.
Let's get it done. They're done.
And about how many drinks do you think you had that night?
About 5 or 6 beers, a couple shots.
And what about Ben and Jake?
Oh man, they had a lot more than I did, that's for sure.
Kelly Garner weighs about 160 pounds. Jake and Ben about 180 each. Over the course of 4 hours, if each drank between 5 and 8 beers and had 3 to 6 one-ounce shots of hard liquor, their blood alcohol content would be somewhere between 0.24 and 0.28. That's 3 times the legal driving limit of 0.08 for someone over the age of 21. Keep in mind that at 0.3, most people lose consciousness, and at 0.4, most people become comatose and may die.
Yes, I was just gonna say 3 words. Ow. Don't worry about it. Oh, you got wiped out, dude. Later on your party, mother.
Shut up.
They even have trouble remembering where they parked and which car is theirs.
Yo. What? Where you
The car's this way, guys. Oh, geniuses, you're going the wrong way, dude. Chase, it's not a car.
I'm starving. No, I'm fine. I'll drive. No, I'm fine. I'm fine. No, seriously.
How did you guys decide who was going to drive?
Well, I thought Jake was the least drunk, and it was his car, so... And Jake pretty much always drove.
Was he okay to drive?
No.
Oh my God.
So hard to get in.
Dude, look at Ben, dude. You're about to throw up, aren't you, dude?
Ben.
Yes, I'm driving. No?
Ben.
What are you laughing at? What are you
You're
laughing
drunk ass.
at? I got it.
Okay.
You put the key in the knob and you turn. Oh, fudge.
Bye.
You get any numbers tonight, Kel?
Still
I just spat everywhere.
You almost hit that range.
I'm fine.
You almost hit that range.
Oh.
Oh my God.
We are officially high school graduates. Yeah! What's up?
Turn this.
No, dude, I can't see you, dude. No, dude.
Ridiculous.
Yeah.
That is like the definition of a ridiculous party. You should be fine.
Yo, Chase, what'd you think of the party?
You really want to know what I thought about the party?
Yeah.
Oh my God. Did you see him though? Did you see that guy? That kid.
Party was f***ing awesome, baby! Woo!
God.
Yeah! I'm drunk.
So fucking
Oh my
loud,
God.
dude.
Ben.
Yo, Chase, you alright over here, man?
Oh, dude, he looks fine to me.
Whoa. The one time where Ben Chase doesn't say one word.
Oh my God.
Yo, Chase, seriously, you alright, man? No. You gonna throw up?
Sophie eventually takes the camera because they are afraid Ben might throw up on it.
Dude, here. Dude, take the camera.
I want to sell.
Take the camera, take the camera. I hooked up with a girl.
Uh-huh.
And
Jake, tell me. Look at you right now.
look at you. You're so hot. Yeah, look at you. Hey, whoa. I'm kidding. Dude,
Jake can be seen aggressively passing another car.
I am gonna go around it.
Jesus. Did you? Wait, no. That guy just totally
let me flip this off. Dude.
Go back,
Without a care in the world, they drive on. They just passed this car going, what, 40, 50 miles an hour. What were you thinking at this point?
I was thinking that everything was fine. Jake seemed completely fine, and this wasn't very different from any other night out, really.
We're graduates, baby!
Yeah,
Hell yeah, man. We graduated.
Woo!
We graduated. Soph, we graduated. Can you believe it? We finally, all those years, that it took us. We graduated. Hey, man, Happy just gave me the go back, dude.
And then, in an instant, everything changes. What you hear now is Sophie, who is trapped in the car, screaming. A witness calls 911. The firefighters assess the scene and then carefully pull Sophie out of the wreck. The camera, though cracked and broken, somehow kept recording. Jake Matthews is pulled from the car. He is not breathing. Ben is put on a gurney, alive for now, but in critical condition. Sophie sees the paramedics cover Jake's body. Today in our studio is the first time Sophie has seen the footage from that fateful night. What's it like watching this now?
It gives me the chills. I just can't believe that happened, and it's still so difficult to realize that that they're gone.
It's okay.
I'm sorry.
Do you remember any of the accident?
No, not really. I remember getting hit. It felt like a wall hit us. There's glass everywhere. I don't really remember anything else. Just woke up in the hospital.
Eventually, a police officer notices the camera, and the tape finally ends. What do you remember when you think about that night?
I remember going to the party, and we got there, and then I remember Ben jumping on Jake's back and tackling him as we were leaving the party. And then I remember that I was looking at Jake and I was telling him that I loved him. And then we got hit.
Just hold on there for me. You ever think about this kind of thing could happen?
No. No, I never thought that it could happen to us.
At 1:34 a.m. on June 7th, Jake's SUV sped through the intersection of 8th and Burnside. In his intoxicated state, he neglected to stop at a red light. Jake's car was struck by another car passing through the intersection. As a result of the accident, Sophie Davis broke 2 ribs and received several deep cuts from the broken glass. Kelly Garner suffered from a broken leg and a fractured collarbone. Ben Chase sustained severe brain contusions. He never regained consciousness and died hours later in the hospital. Jake Matthews died instantly upon impact.
On the those 2 children there, Bob and Helena Pack. Mr. Pack is a person whose wife was walking through Silicon Valley with her 2 kids. She was pregnant with twins, and a woman who had been at a graduation party and the dentist about 2 hours before had been drinking beer, and it combined with the painkillers, and she passed out and swerved and killed everybody except the wife. All 4 children, the 2 unborn, were dead. Bob Pack actually had a huge settlement from that and used the money to turn this video into something that people like us can use in schools. We struggle with whether or not you would show kids this, but I resolve it one of 2 ways. They might be happy and I just disturbed them, but if I disturbed them and saved one of them, I think I'm going to go that way. So those of you who are lawyers now, if you can, Bruce, how many times have we seen that movie? 50. It always, I can actually hardly talk when it's over. But there's what the engaging message that it creates is obviously that, but we actually have in our school program, we have a preliminary hearing, and of course, Jake Matthew, the driver in our video, survives and he's wheeled into the auditorium. It is bound over for trial. And those of you who are criminal lawyers, you know the difference between homicide by DUI and DUI, reckless driving. 7 years, no matter if you're 18 years old or under. So if you want to think like a lawyer, do you remember when he's driving and she says something to him and he looks over, that's when she says, "I love you," or something, and she's aiming the camera at him. The question becomes, whether or not he was driving and that caused him to take his eyes off the road and cause the impact, or whether the alcohol, and that we actually have a preliminary hearing. It's always bound for trial. They don't understand that it's bound for trial. It doesn't matter. The magistrate has to bind it for trial. And it's really a dramatic moment when they get the kid in the wheelchair and cuff his hands and wheel him out in front of the student body. And then, of course, then we have a trial about 2 months later, and we actually have a real trial. Al Lindsay usually plays the part of the defense attorney, and the local prosecutor is prosecuting the case. We've tried it, I bet, 25 times. It seems to come out either way, homicide by vehicle, DUI related, or just DUI. It's 50-50. You could try it in front of adults, and it's a very, very cool trial, aside from the strategy of it. And we actually have a fact pattern and whatever. So that is how we take this into the schools and create an engaging message for the kids over a couple months. They're really interested in the preliminary hearing, and then of course they want to see the trial. And the trial's really cool. The judge will go maybe a week before the trial, and we'll already have jurors picked, and he will explain the jury instructions, stuff. We won't have the whole trial, but we'll have closing arguments usually. So at the end, can you make it play again? There's a really neat message from Blaine Garrison on the end.
Drunk driving is not an accident. Every year, there are over 500,000 alcohol-related car accidents in the United States alone. That's more than 5 football stadiums full of people, or the entire population of Washington, D.C., Boston, or Denver. They get into an accident every year. Ask yourself if you've ever driven after having a few drinks, or have gotten into a car with someone who has been drinking. If you answered yes, you were lucky. Lucky you didn't get into an accident. Lucky you didn't die. Lucky you didn't kill anyone. The reality is this can happen to anyone, anywhere, at any time. It can happen to you. I know, because it happened to me. My name's Lane Garrison, and on December 2nd, 2006, my life changed forever.
Okay, so now that takes us into criminal law. Now, I want to make sure that I explain to you some of you are not criminal lawyers, the matriculation of a case through criminal law. The first thing that happens is that you're arrested, okay, and that could be by mail, or it could be by being arrested at the scene. The second thing that happens is you're arraigned. You're brought before a magistrate who tells you what you did. I could be out to dinner with my wife tonight, and I would start talking to her, and halfway through the conversation, my words are no longer coming back to me. I found out later I did something. I didn't have a clue what I did, but I was not arraigned. Okay? So that's what the arraignment process is for. In your panoply of criminal due process rights, usually there'll be a bond issue come up. After arraignment at the magistrate, then you have a preliminary hearing, and if there is sufficient evidence, it would be bound over for trial. If it's bound over for trial, then from the time it's bound, depending on what county, it might take months before it comes up in the system again, and then the defendant is arraigned again. This time he's arraigned in front of a common pleas judge and told what he did again after what charges were bound over for court. At that point in time, you have 7 days to file a bill of particulars, I think one of the most neglected criminal procedure things there are, and 10 days for discovery, basically, right, Jim? And formal and informal, I usually send them both in one envelope. Anyway, little shortcut. And then 30 days to file an omnibus motion, maybe a motion to dismiss or something like that, all from the arraignment date in court. He remembers this stuff. He did a lot more of it than I did. We used to actually be against each other in court sometimes in Lawrence County years ago, in the 80s. Okay. Anyway, so what happens after that is there'll be a hearing if I file a motion on the legal issues or on the bill of particulars or something, and then if it still survives, then we're still negotiating and we start getting into some plea negotiation and eventually pick a jury, go to trial, win, go home, lose, sentencing comes up. I'm really explaining those steps because each and every one of those provides an opportunity, like 570, to get them in treatment and actually show the progress of the treatment. You know, one of the greatest tools for an attorney who uses a strategy like this that our attorneys do is the continuance. There are magistrates in the Pittsburgh area that for years ago they were doing it. They would grant a continuance to a case and allow you to get into treatment, and eventually if you come back and show them you're in treatment and it's successful, some magistrates will actually dismiss the case, and it never does go downtown. So all of this is like solution-oriented stuff. And what's my message? My message is that it goes back to where I started, where we're members of a community, and our community is made up of those 3 pillars: educators, lawyers, and doctors. We try to have all of it come together in the school building. Why? Several reasons. Number one, there's a brick and mortar facility that is centrally located usually to all of the kids. Ronald McDonald taught us a long time ago, if you have something that draws the kids, parents will follow. So it seems to be a nice way. Usually when you go into a school, they have all these bells and whistles and high technology stuff and presentation devices and whatnot. So generally our program is a program that is designed to get people informed. It's leadership. It's the legal profession. And let's take a second to take a little test of that breeze. The lawyers now, like the lawyers who started in our references in the Philadelphia Convention, are now assisting doctors, not suing each other, they're assisting doctors in creating a treatment strategy that goes beyond some of the medical science that's existing right now. Remember, we talked about all of that fluctuation in Valium, in whether pain-free is a vital sign and all that. Now we have the lawyers affecting change in the medical community. We have lawyers assisting doctors in making a treatment strategy binding. I'll never forget calling, you remember Molly? At Dr. Woolhender's office, Dr. Woolhender's Wilkins Avenue. I'll never forget, her name is Molly. And Molly's a wonderful person. She says, "Oh, Mr. Papa, it's very nice to meet you." "Yeah, hi Molly, how are you?" "Good. We like your patients." She said, I'll never forget this. She said, "We like your patients." "Okay, that's good. Why?" "Because they always show up and they always come back and they do what they're told." "Well, they're going to jail if they don't," okay? It might be the simple reason, maybe not, anyway. And it's not that way. When we get them actually in touch with who they are, you know what happens? Remember I talked about the key ally? You know what happens when that person does that? And that person is successful about 2 or 3 months? Anybody ever go to downtown Pittsburgh on light up night? Jim, I'll bet you do it, right? That'll be coming in November like that. Pretty soon it'll be here. Light up night, the Christmas thing. You know what happens when you get a guy and you take them back away from that? And he goes 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. You know what he gets? A reputation, a new one. And he defends it. And he stands up. And just like Abraham Lincoln, no more. He has resolved no more. And wow, haven't we put all these dynamics together in the community and really done our job? So, as we close, I will just give you a little snippet of our high school program and ask you to consider, getting a group together and do it. Become a leader. Well, hey, we'll support you with everything we have, information and whatever. Dante, you can close the tray now. I will close with the words of Alexander Lindsay. He tells the story about the time he was at a funeral for 2 cheerleaders. There were 2 blonde cheerleaders at the end of their cul-de-sac. He said they always did babysitting, and one of them died. She was dating the captain of the football team. They went to a Christmas party. She was matching him drink for drink. He's big captain of football team. She's matching him drink for drink. He's drinking beer. She's drinking mixed things that don't taste like they're dangerous. Her blood alcohol content was certainly a lot higher, a lot less body weight to metabolize that. She went to lay down because she wasn't feeling well in the cloakroom, and she died. There's another way you die from alcohol, and that's real easy to get to 4-0 when you're an inexperienced kid who's drinking. So Al Lindsay always said, he says, you know what? He says he hopes his family never feels bad or something. They hear him telling his story, but he decided that he would never pass up an opportunity to tell that story to some kids. I will never pass up an opportunity to sit here in CLE class when you're sitting there and have to get these credits anyway, to say, please roll up your sleeves and join a real war on drugs, one that has the right allies and one that we can win. Feel really good about yourself. I thank you for being such a patient audience. Some of you might be thinking, God, this wasn't anything I apologize for that, but this is our message, and we appreciate you listening to it. On behalf of Doug, Dr. Barber, Dante, who's part of our team, and my paralegal, Bruce Galick, thank you for being such a great audience. Please don't forget to fill out your form and make sure your name and your email address is on there so that we make sure that you got credit, okay? If any of you have money to pay or whatever, just leave your check with your form, and Bruce will take care of all of that for you, okay? Thank you again. Have a good day. I think we have had it with people being on one addiction substance after another. I think we have had it much too long. I think that we have to push people more. The United States of America is home to 5% of the world's population. The United States of America is home to 25% of the world's prison population. So if we can have a better outcome and we can have somebody be treated, real treatment, verifiable treatment, isn't that safe? 75. What we're hoping to establish within this program is patients that are truly motivated to enter recovery and stay there. This room here is a whole new way, a whole new method of approaching substance abuse.
Honored guests, distinguished community members, welcome. Welcome to your VRN local grand opening. Oh, say can you see by the dawn's early light.
I'm here today for the opening of VRN. I'm very excited about this new exciting opportunity in Newcastle.
The thing that I get most excited about is we all know that the same old status quo hasn't worked in anything. And this is a new and creative way to approach a problem that is ever growing in our society, and in particular right here in Western Pennsylvania.
Okay, Alex, if you could grab one side and Katie, you grab the other. Now, if you notice, everyone, this is a chain.
I'm an attorney who does family law, and as a family law attorney, I have to deal with parents, some of whom from time to time have addiction issues.
So as we cut the chain for the ceremonial grand opening, we are also cutting and breaking the chains of addiction.
I think anytime you have a lot of great, smart people in the room that are ready to be aggressive and attack a problem, I'm excited to be a part of that.
One of my clients has used Vivitrol successfully. I'm happy to report that. So I see a need for this in the war on the opioid crisis. And in my campaigning and in my canvassing, I hear story after story of tragedies relating to opioid and the opioid crisis.
All right, as you cut.
5, 4,
3, 2, 1. Round of applause, please.
I know that Pennsylvania is very concerned. Our legislator, our governor, is very concerned about the opioid crisis and the way that it is wreaking havoc in our families, in our schools, and in our communities. And so I'm delighted that VRN is opening here in Newcastle and is providing another method for us to deal with this crisis.
Honored guests, distinguished community members, we can't thank you enough for being here for the grand opening of your local VRN.
We know that it took 40 years to tox this country, okay? We know that the music was classier for them. The kids responded to it.
Rock stars made it cool to be just crazy and out there, right? We are the rock stars of the new generation. It's cool to be clean. We are making it cool to be clean.
Our challenge and the thing we're working on is making good, making total abstinence as exciting, as engaging as the toxing of this country.
We're reaching out to you to empower your legislators, you to challenge your doctor and say, instead of giving them Narcan and bringing them back to life, thank God, how about if we actually help give them a fighting chance?
Okay, for 15 years, we have had to prove what we do in a court of law in front of an impatient judge, and Attorney Mitko can tell you that, in front of a prosecutor who's tough on crime. We had to prove that we had something that worked. That's what verifiable stands for.
These gentlemen are going to tell you in a couple seconds how we're going to take the compulsion away from the core of the human being, and we're going to put a wall around that compulsion, and we're going to light them up.
Withdrawal is the toughest thing patients have to go through with addiction.
We're going to get them in touch with those special moments that they don't feel because of this drug. And when we do that, we're going to really make a difference.
What if there was something we could do to get them over that hump? To say, hey, there's a light at the end of the tunnel that can work for you.
And what we do is with that total abstinence, medicine-assisted treatment, we can light people up.
With the bridge followed by Vivitrol, we know that for the motivated patients that will stay in the program, we can keep them clean and free of opiates.
This is the school program. We recognize that the most important substance abuse steps need to start there. Kids need to be prevented from getting into substance abuse.
The only place where success comes before work is in the dictionary. Nobody is going to outwork this group here.
It's all about collaboration. It's all about working together.
Because saving lives, helping families, helping reputation, like Angelo said, is truly what we're all about.
I have a dream that what we're doing today is going to change America. It's going to change the world. It's going to change so many people's lives that when we go to bed at night, we're going to want to hug our pillow and say, you did a good job today. Look how many lives you saved. Look how many people are here because of you.
And when our lawyers join hands with our doctors and that whole extended care plan becomes legally binding, then I think a trial judge is going to be proud of who he is on that day when he goes home.
You know, we just don't want these people to just survive. We want them to live.